Sherlock Holmes and the Phantom Ship of the Thames, an honouring audiobook's original story from the reminiscences of John H. Watson, M.D., Act I's The Unveiling of the Phantom. The autumn of 1893 had draped London in its customary cloak of fog and damp, a season that usually found me, Dr. John H. Watson, comfortably ensconced by the hearth at 221B Baker Street, contemplating the eccentricities of my remarkable friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Yet, this particular October night, the chill seemed to seep into the very marrow of the city's bones, and an unsettling rumour, whispered from the docks of Rotherhithe to the bustling thoroughfares of the Strand, had begun to disturb the normally stoic calm of our great metropolis. It spoke of a ship, a spectral vessel, that appeared as if from the very maw of the Thames mist each night, only to vanish with the dawn. The newspapers, ever eager to titillate their readership, had christened it the Phantom Ship of the Thames. The Daily Chronicle breathlessly reported sightings by night watchmen and river police, descriptions varying wildly from a three-masted schooner with tattered sails to a squat black collier, yet all agreeing on its derelict state and inexplicable appearance. The Times, with its usual gravitas, attempted to debunk the hysteria, attributing the phenomena to optical illusions or drunken folly, but even their measured tones could not entirely dispel the undercurrent of unease. Such was the pervasive nature of the mystery that it even permeated the hallowed halls of Scotland Yard, whose most seasoned river constables confessed themselves utterly baffled. It was this official consternation, rather than the more sensational accounts, that finally piqued the interest of Sherlock Holmes. For days he had paced our sitting room, a solitary sentinel against the tide of ordinary life, immersed in a tome on Persian rug weaving, seemingly oblivious to the swirling mists of public fascination. His silences were often the most profound indicators of his mental activity, a deep current flowing beneath the placid surface. "Watson," he remarked suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet like a freshly sharpened razor, "have you perchance observed the recent output of our esteemed commissioner? His public pronouncements on this so-called phantom ship betray a level of perplexity bordering on apoplexy. A man who prides himself on his grasp of all things nautical, now reduced to mumbling about atmospheric anomalies and collective hallucination. It quite strains the credulity, wouldn't you agree?" I lowered my own newspaper, the scent of fresh ink mingling with the aroma of Holmes's strong shag tobacco. "Indeed, Holmes, the reports are certainly most peculiar. No vessel of that description is known to harbour in these waters, and yet multiple witnesses attest to its presence, always in the same stretch of the river near the old warehouses, always after dusk, and always gone by first light. What do you make of it?" Holmes merely arched an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his keen grey eyes. "Make of it, Watson? At present, a mere hypothesis. But the absence of a logical explanation is often the most compelling invitation for investigation. The very fact that the Yard, with all its resources, has failed to account for a substantial, if temporary, maritime presence suggests either an unprecedented degree of incompetence or, more likely, a meticulously crafted deception." He rose, stretching languidly, his tall, lean figure silhouetted against the gaslight. "Fetch your coat, Watson. The Thames, I fancy, beckons. And perhaps a certain Inspector Lestrade, if my understanding of the Yard's current state of despair is accurate, will soon be gracing our doorstep." No sooner had the words left his lips than a robust knocking resounded through our door. Mrs. Hudson's familiar shuffle preceded the hurried ascent of heavy footsteps. A moment later, Inspector Lestrade, his usually ruddy face tinged with a shade of grey, stood framed in our doorway, his bowler hat clutched in a white-knuckled grip. "Holmes!" he blurted, his customary gruffness replaced by an uncharacteristic urgency. "Thank heavens you're in. This damnable ship, it's driving us mad. My men are on the verge of mutiny, the public is in a frenzy, and the Commissioner threatens my pension daily. We've patrolled that stretch of the river hourly, set up observation posts, even sent divers down in broad daylight. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And yet, come nightfall, there it is again, a hulking, rotting derelict appearing from nowhere and then, poof, gone with the dawn." Holmes gestured towards a comfortable armchair, his expression one of polite, almost detached interest. "Pray, sit down, Inspector. Compose yourself. A mystery that eludes the estimable efforts of Scotland Yard is, by definition, one worthy of consideration. Describe this phantom, if you would, in greater detail than the sensationalist press permits." Lestrade gratefully sank into the chair, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "It's an old merchantman, Mr. Holmes. That much is clear from the various descriptions. Perhaps a brig or a bark, though some swear it's too squat for that. Deck rotten, rigging mostly gone, no sails. Looks like it's been at the bottom of the sea for a century and just bubbled up. But here's the kicker. Every night it appears exactly off the old East India Company warehouse near Wapping Old Stairs. And every night, come dawn, it's simply not there. No trace, no wake, no debris, nothing to suggest it was ever there. It's as if the very river swallows it whole." "Fascinating," Holmes murmured, steepling his fingers. "And the strange markings alluded to in the Chronicle? Are they consistent across observations?" "Ah, yes, that's another queer detail," Lestrade exclaimed, leaning forward. "Almost every witness mentions peculiar symbols painted or carved onto its hull. Some say they're ancient runes, others pirate sigils. My men thought it was some sort of prank, but they're too elaborate, too consistent in their appearance to be a simple lark. And no two witnesses describe them precisely alike, yet they all speak of serpents or whirlpools or jagged lines on the bow." Holmes's eyes, which had previously held a mere glimmer of interest, now sharpened to an almost predatory intensity. "Serpents and whirlpools, you say? And a consistent location, off Wapping Old Stairs, a site steeped in maritime history and notorious for its darker associations. This is no mere hallucination, Inspector, nor a simple prank. This is a deliberate, meticulously executed deception, and deceptions, as you well know, are rarely without purpose." "But what purpose, Holmes? A ghost ship? For what gain?" Lestrade threw his hands up in exasperation. "Precisely, Inspector, for what gain? Ghosts, by their nature, rarely engage in commerce. No, this phantom ship is a prop, Lestrade, an elaborate stage device designed to distract, to mislead, to perhaps even intimidate. A rather grand flourish, wouldn't you say? And grand flourishes often conceal grand schemes. You've had no success boarding it, I presume?" Lestrade snorted. "Board it? We can barely get close. The currents around it are treacherous, the air around it feels cold. And every time we send a launch, it's as if the fog thickens around it, hiding it from view. It's like the bloody thing doesn't want to be found." "Indeed," Holmes said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "An excellent defensive mechanism. It seems, Inspector, that the river has become a theatre, and we are merely the audience. Until now, that is. Watson, our journey begins not with the ship itself, but with the river. Inspector, what time do you anticipate its next appearance?" Lestrade checked his pocket watch. "High tide is at 10:30 tonight, Mr. Holmes. It usually appears precisely 2 hours to prepare," Holmes declared, rising with a sudden burst of energy. "I shall require a sturdy launch, Inspector, one capable of navigating those treacherous currents you speak of, and manned by an individual not prone to superstitious flights of fancy, a man of quiet competence, if you please, and a map of the Thames, specifically the older editions depicting the wharves and mooring points around Wapping." The chill of the October night bit deep as we descended into the labyrinthine alleys leading to the Thames. The gaslights, struggling against the pervasive fog, cast an ethereal glow upon the slick cobblestones, making familiar landmarks appear as phantom outlines. The air was thick with the scent of coal smoke, damp earth, and the undeniable tang of the river, a complex olfactory tapestry woven from brine, stagnant water, and the distant promise of the sea. It was a smell Holmes often declared as the very essence of London, a city whose veins were fed by the great artery of the Thames. Lestrade, true to his word, had secured a robust launch, a squat, powerful vessel named the Waterman, piloted by a grizzled, taciturn man named Silas, whose face seemed carved from the very river mud. Silas had seen too much on the Thames to be easily surprised, and his weathered eyes held a detached resignation that Holmes seemed to approve of. Silas, Holmes instructed as we cast off from a small private dock near London Bridge, the city lights a blurred halo behind us. "We seek a derelict, as yet unnamed vessel reported to appear off Wapping Old Stairs. Have you encountered it yourself?" Silas grunted, his gaze fixed on the murky waters ahead. "Seen it, aye, a few times. Looks like an old East Indiaman, she does, or what's left of one. like she sank 50 years ago and just decided to float up for a bit of air. Always appears at high tide near the old warehouse, and never a soul aboard, not that I've seen. And her disappearance at dawn? Holmes pressed. Silas merely spat into the Thames. That's the queer bit. 1 minute she's there, hulking like a beast in the fog, the next, gone. No current strong enough to sweep her away without a trace. It defies common sense, it does. Holmes nodded, his eyes scanning the swirling mists ahead. Indeed, Silas, that is precisely why we are here. The journey upriver was slow, the powerful thrum of the waterman's engine, a monotonous counterpoint to the gentle lapping of the waves against her hull. The fog grew denser as we approached Wapping, obscuring the familiar landmarks until they became mere shadows. The warehouse district loomed ahead, a series of dark, oppressive blocks, their upper floors lost in the swirling vapour. The silence, broken only by the mournful cry of a distant tugboat, was unnerving. Then, through a sudden thinning of the mist, it appeared. It was an imposing spectacle, a skeletal leviathan materializing from the vapour. The phantom ship, indeed. It was a 3-masted bark, or what remained of one, her hull encrusted with centuries of grime and seaweed, her paint long since peeled away to reveal the dark skeletal timbers beneath. Her masts, though still standing, were devoid of sails, their yards twisted and broken like arthritic fingers grasping at the sky. A gaping hole marred her starboard bow as if she had collided with an iceberg, or perhaps a larger, more formidable adversary. Yet, for all her apparent decay, there was an unnatural stillness about her, a lack of the gentle sway one might expect from a derelict vessel at anchor in the current. She seemed to float, suspended, almost defiant of the river's restless embrace. "By Jove, Holmes," I breathed, my voice barely above a whisper. "She's even more formidable than the papers described, and utterly silent." Holmes said nothing, his gaze fixed intently on the vessel. He held a pair of powerful field glasses to his eyes, sweeping them slowly along her length. "Indeed, Watson. Silent, yes, but not entirely without secrets." We drew closer, Silas expertly navigating the waterman through the swirling currents that Lestrade had warned us about. As we approached, a peculiar chill seemed to emanate from the ship, a damp, heavy cold that cut through our thick coats. The fog, as if sentient, swirled around her, momentarily obscuring sections of her hull before revealing them again. "The markings, Silas," Holmes suddenly commanded, his voice sharp. "Can you bring us closer to the bow starboard side? Keep your distance, but allow me a better view." Silas nodded, nudging the throttle. As the waterman crept closer, the strange markings became visible, even without the aid of Holmes's glasses. They were indeed elaborate, etched deep into the ancient timbers of the hull, and then, judging by the faint discoloured residue, painted over with a dark, almost black pigment that had long since faded into the grime. I could discern what appeared to be the sinuous coils of a serpent, its head depicted with malevolent eyes, intertwined with abstract, swirling patterns that might have been interpreted as whirlpools or even stylized ocean currents. There were also jagged, lightning-like lines intersecting the serpent's coils, giving the entire design a chaotic yet purposeful appearance. "Remarkable," Holmes murmured, lowering his glasses. "The serpentine motif is prevalent, as are the swirling vortexes. But note the depth of the etching, Watson. These are not recent additions. They have weathered many a storm, many a year at sea. They are as old as the ship herself, I venture. And yet," he trailed off, his gaze shifting, almost imperceptibly, to a point just above the waterline. "And yet what, Holmes?" I prompted, eager for his insight. "And yet, observe the faintest traces of a more recent application, Watson. A faint sheen, visible only when the gaslight from our launch catches it at a certain angle. Almost invisible, applied over the original. A waterproofing agent, perhaps? Or something more insidious?" He paused, then his eyes narrowed. "Silas, approach the stern, port side. Carefully now. I wish to observe the stern post." Silas skillfully manoeuvred the launch around the ghostly vessel. As we rounded the stern, the fog briefly lifted, and a flash of moonlight illuminated a section of the stern post. There, barely visible beneath the layers of decay, was a faint, almost obliterated inscription. Holmes leaned forward, peering intently. "Ah, just as I suspected," he exclaimed, a note of triumph in his voice. "The remnants of a name, the Sea Serpent, and beneath it, faintly, a home port. Plymouth, A vessel of some considerable age indeed to bear such a name, and one with a rather colourful history if my memory serves me. What history, Holmes? Lestrade interjected, his voice tight with anticipation. Later, Inspector, later. For now, observe the anomaly. The general decay of the vessel is consistent with a ship long abandoned, perhaps even scuttled. The timbers are waterlogged, the rigging rotten, yet the mooring chain, Inspector. Holmes pointed towards a thick, heavy chain disappearing into the murky depths, is surprisingly robust. And the shackle, though encrusted with barnacles, appears remarkably new, or at least recently cleaned and resecured. A curious juxtaposition, would you not agree? The death throes of a phantom, yet with the vigour of a newly born tether. Lestrade grunted, clearly unable to reconcile the observation with his existing theories. But why? Why make an old chain look new? Not make an old chain look new, Lestrade, Holmes corrected, a flicker of impatience in his tone. Rather, replace an old chain with a new one. Or, at the very least, attach a new shackle to an existing submerged chain. This ship, for all its apparent dereliction, is quite deliberately being held in place, a stationary prop in a larger theatrical production, I asked, grappling with the central enigma. And where does it go? Holmes smiled, a rare, genuine smile that always promised revelation. That, my dear Watson, is the crux of the matter. The currents here are indeed strong, as Silas has attested, but no current, however powerful, could simply spirit away a vessel of this displacement without a trace. Unless, of course, it wasn't being swept away by the current at all, but rather pulled. He gestured vaguely towards the dark waters beneath the ship. Think, Watson, if it appears at high tide and vanishes by dawn, what does that suggest? That it's somehow connected to the tidal flow? I ventured. More than connected, my dear fellow, manipulated by it. Consider, a ship of this age would sit deep in the water, especially if waterlogged. If it were truly derelict, it would be a menace to navigation, subject to drifting, but it appears consistently in the same spot. This suggests a fixed point of operation, and its disappearance, it cannot be simply floating away. There must be a mechanism. Holmes then turned his attention to Silas. Silas, have you ever heard tales of submerged structures in this part of the Thames? Old moorings, perhaps, or even sunken barges? Silas rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Aye, Mr. Holmes. There's old stories of a sunken jetty from before the Great Fire, they say, and a few barges went down in the 78 floods, never salvaged, but nothing big enough to hide a ship like this. Precisely, Holmes said, almost to himself. Not to hide it, but to pull it down. Watson, I believe we are dealing with a ship that is not merely appearing and disappearing, but rather sinking and resurfacing. My jaw dropped. Sinking, but how and why? The why is the more intriguing question, Watson, and one we shall endeavour to answer. The how is likely a matter of ingenious engineering. Ballast tanks, perhaps, designed to be flooded and then pumped dry. Or, more crudely, weighted chains attached to a submerged anchor, designed to be released or taken up at specific times, synchronized with the tides. The treacherous currents Lestrade spoke of are likely not natural phenomena, but a consequence of the vessel's rapid submergence or emergence, creating localized disturbances. A clever ruse, designed to deter the curious and lend credence to the phantom myth. As he spoke, Holmes's gaze drifted back to the peculiar markings on the hull. These ancient symbols, the serpent and the whirlpool, they are not mere decoration, Watson. They are part of the deception. The sea serpent, a rather fitting name, wouldn't you say, for a vessel that seemingly rises from the depths, and the whirlpools, a visual metaphor for its apparent vanishing act, a narrative crafted in timber and paint to deter scrutiny. But what about the pirate treasure, Holmes? Lestrade, who had remained silent, now voiced the question that had been gnawing at him. The talk in the docks is of old pirate maps and chests of gold, and this ship being the key. Holmes turned, a glint in his eye. Ah, the pirate treasure. A delicious embellishment, Inspector, calculated to add a layer of romantic mystery and further divert attention from the prosaic truth. Yet it may not be entirely a fabrication. The Sea Serpent, if my memory serves me, was indeed a vessel of some ill repute in the late 17th century. She was known to ply the waters of the Caribbean, engaging in unsanctioned commerce. Rumour had it she was laden with Spanish gold when she vanished without a trace off the coast of Hispaniola. A convenient coincidence, wouldn't you say, that a ship bearing the same name should resurface here, almost 2 centuries later, adorned with the very symbols of the sea monster that was her namesake. "So it is the same ship?" I asked, a thrill of excitement running through me. "Unlikely, Watson. Highly unlikely. A ship that vanishes off Hispaniola does not, as a rule, reappear in the Thames intact 200 years later. Unless, of course, the laws of physics have been suspended for the convenience of our criminal. No, I suspect the name and the legend are merely appropriated. A piece of historical window dressing designed to enhance the phantom illusion and perhaps to lure a specific type of enthusiast. A treasure hunter, perhaps, or a historian with a penchant for the arcane." Holmes then directed Silas to bring the launch alongside the Sea Serpent's starboard bow, where the gaping hole was most prominent. "Silas, hold us steady here. Watson, Inspector, observe this aperture. It is not, as one might initially assume, the result of a collision. Note the splintered timbers, the clean break on the inner edges. This was not an impact. This was a deliberate cutting, and the edges are remarkably fresh despite the surrounding decay. They have been treated with a sealant designed to prevent further ingress of water and then crudely disguised with grime and mud. This is our entrance, gentlemen." "You mean to board it, Holmes?" Lestrade asked, a hint of apprehension in his voice. "Naturally, Inspector. One cannot truly understand a phantom without stepping into its domain. Silas, can you bring the launch close enough for us to make the leap? And perhaps you could fashion a rudimentary grappling hook from that coil of rope and the boat hook, a temporary purchase upon its decaying deck." Silas, ever practical, produced a coil of rope and expertly tied a sturdy knot around the boat hook. With a practiced flick of his wrist, he tossed it onto the Sea Serpent's deck, the hook catching on a rusted stanchion. "It holds, Mr. Holmes," he grunted. "Excellent, Silas. Watson, Inspector, mind your footing. This vessel, despite its appearance, is a meticulously crafted snare." With Holmes leading, we clambered from the relative safety of the waterman onto the decayed deck of the Sea Serpent. The silence that had seemed merely unnerving from a distance now pressed in upon us, a heavy, suffocating blanket. The deck timbers groaned under our weight, a chorus of protest from the ancient wood, and a rank, musty smell, like forgotten crypts and stagnant water, assaulted our nostrils. The fog swirled around us, rendering the opposite side of the Thames invisible, creating a private, isolated world atop the phantom ship. Holmes immediately knelt, his magnifying glass already in hand, examining the very timbers beneath his feet. "Observe, Watson, the thin film of grease, almost imperceptible, clinging to the deck here, and the faintest indentations, as if heavy objects have been dragged across it recently. Not cargo, not the typical detritus of a derelict. These are fresh marks. And the grease, motor oil, I believe. Incongruous, wouldn't you agree, for a ship supposedly abandoned for centuries?" He moved towards the mainmast, his fingers tracing the rope burns on the ancient wood. And these rope marks. Not the wear of old rigging, but the friction burns of ropes that have been tautly held, then rapidly released. Consistent with the operation of a system designed to raise and lower heavy objects. Lestrade, ever the pragmatist, was peering into the gaping hole on the starboard side. "This hole, Holmes. It looks like it could have been made for loading and unloading, but what on earth would they be smuggling on a ghost ship?" "Precisely, Inspector. The most valuable commodities are often those that require the least scrutiny, and what better way to transport illicit goods than on a vessel no one dares to approach? Consider, too, the precise location. Whopping old stairs. Once a notorious haunt for smugglers, a labyrinth of tunnels and secret passages leading directly into the heart of the city. A legacy, perhaps, that some less scrupulous individuals are keen to revive. We entered the ship through the crude aperture, descending into the belly of the heavy with the scent of mildew and damp wood, but also, surprisingly, a faint metallic tang. Holmes produced a powerful bullseye lantern, its beam cutting through the gloom, revealing a scene of utter dereliction. The hold was a cavernous space, timbers warped and rotted, water seeping in through countless cracks. Rusting tools lay scattered, remnants of a bygone era. Yet amidst the decay, anomalies began to emerge. "Watson, over here." Holmes whispered, his voice resonating eerily in the confined space. He pointed his lantern beam to a section of the floor, almost indistinguishable from the surrounding rot. Note the unnatural regularity of these planks. Too uniform, too sturdy compared to the rest, and the faint sheen of varnish beneath the grime. A false floor, I believe, concealing something. Lestrade, with a grunt of effort, began to test the planks with his foot. One section, less rotten than the others, gave way slightly. With a combined effort, we managed to pry up a section of the false flooring, revealing a narrow, darkened cavity below. The metallic tang was stronger here. A hidden compartment, I observed, peering into the blackness. Just as you suspected, Holmes. Holmes lowered himself into the cavity, his lantern illuminating a small, well-concealed space. It was surprisingly dry and cleaner than the rest of the ship. Within it, neatly stacked, were several large, rectangular bundles wrapped in oiled canvas. He carefully unwrapped one. "Opium, Watson," he announced, his voice grim, "and of the purest quality. From the distinctive markings on the bundles, I should say from the Golden Triangle, recently imported. A highly lucrative commodity and one that fetches a staggering price on the London black market." Lestrade whistled softly. "Opium. So it's smuggling after all, but how do they get it on and off without being seen?" "The Phantom. Illusion serves its purpose, Inspector," Holmes explained, extracting a small, delicate syringe from his kit. "The ship appears at night under the cover of fog and darkness. The illicit cargo is transferred, likely to small, swift barges, that then disappear into the network of tributary canals and sewers that crisscross this district. By dawn, the ship is submerged, taking its secret with it, while the opium is already in the hands of its distributors." He then shone his light around the hidden compartment, his eyes missing nothing. "And observe this, gentlemen. Not merely opium. Here, tucked away in the corner, a small, leather-bound journal." He carefully extracted the water-stained book. Its pages were brittle with age, but legible. The script within was faded, written in an archaic hand. He opened it to a random page, his eyes swiftly scanning the text. "A ship's log, Watson," he declared, his voice tinged with excitement. "From the original Sea Serpent, I do believe. Dating back to the late 17th century. And fascinatingly, interspersed with entries detailing voyages to the Caribbean and encounters with Spanish galleons, there are crude drawings of the very markings we observed on the hull." He flipped through a few more pages. "And here, a reference to a great sea serpent, a mythical beast said to guard a hoard of untold riches on a cursed isle. A legend, perhaps, that the original crew of this vessel believed in, or perhaps sought to perpetuate to protect their own ill-gotten gains. And now the very same legend or its symbols are being used by our modern-day criminals. A curious blend of the ancient and the utterly modern. So the pirate treasure wasn't just a rumour after all?" Lestrade pondered, his eyes widening. "The treasure is a red herring, Inspector, but one with a basis in historical fact," Holmes clarified. "The legend existed. The original Sea Serpent may have indeed accumulated a considerable fortune, but our current syndicate is not after that buried treasure. They are using the legend and the ship's name and its original markings to create a convincing illusion. The phantom aspect, the curse, the treasure, all designed to make people look for ghosts and gold while they quietly conduct their very material, very illegal business." He pointed to another section of the compartment. "And observe these fine metal shavings, Watson, almost like filings, and a faint smell of ozone. This compartment isn't just for storage. It's also where the mechanism for submerging and surfacing the ship is operated. These filings suggest the presence of heavy machinery, possibly hydraulic or pneumatic pumps, operated with considerable force. And the ozone, perhaps an electrical component? A powerful generator, most likely, needed to rapidly pump out the water from hidden ballast tanks. So they're using an old ship as a front for a sophisticated smuggling operation?" I summarized, still trying to grasp the sheer audacity of the scheme. "Precisely, Watson. A masterful piece of misdirection. The apparent decay, the historical association, the ghost ship narrative, all designed to deflect suspicion and deter investigation. Who would dare approach a cursed vessel when lucrative cargo is being transferred right under their noses? It's a psychological weapon as much as a physical one." A sudden, faint creak from above deck jolted us. Holmes's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "Silence, gentlemen. We are not alone." The air grew heavy with a palpable sense of dread. We extinguished our lanterns, plunging the compartment into near-total darkness, relying only on the sliver of moonlight filtering through the gap in the false floor. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, sounded above us, echoing through the derelict vessel. There were more than one. 2, perhaps 3 individuals, moving with a predatory caution. The rhythmic scrape of a boot against rotten wood, the faint metallic clink of something heavy being set down. "They're coming aboard," Lestrade whispered, his hand instinctively going to his revolver. Holmes held up a restraining hand. "Patience, Inspector. Let us observe. Knowledge is our most potent weapon." The footsteps drew closer to the hole in the hull, and then, slowly, a beam of light cut through the gloom, momentarily illuminating the dark cavity beneath the false floor. We pressed ourselves against the damp timbers, our breaths held. A large, shadowy figure loomed at the edge of the hole, its silhouette distorted by the flickering lantern it carried. It was a powerfully built man, his frame filling the opening. He wore a heavy, dark coat, and a wide-brimmed hat obscured his features. Another figure, leaner and more agile, joined him, carrying what appeared to be a large, padlocked metal trunk. They exchanged a few low, guttural words, indistinguishable in the cavernous hold. Then the powerful man stooped, and with surprising agility for his size, dropped into the hidden compartment, followed by his leaner companion and the trunk. They were within arm's reach. The powerful man, with a grunt, set down his lantern, illuminating the small space with a harsh, revealing light. His face was grim, scarred, with eyes that held a cold, ruthless glint. The other man, thinner and with a furtive glance, began to struggle with the padlock on the trunk. "Having trouble with it, Finn?" the scarred man growled, his voice a low rumble. "We haven't all night. The tide won't wait for your fumbling fingers." "It's stiff, boss," Finn whined, tugging at the padlock. "Damn thing hasn't been opened in ages." "It has to be opened tonight, you fool," the boss snapped. "The shipment is due, and the schedule is tight. This is the last of the old stock. Everything else goes to the new drop point." As Finn continued to struggle, Holmes's gaze was fixed on the scarred man. His eyes, quick and discerning, noted the powerful build, the calloused hands, the subtle scent of coal tar and cheap cigar almost overlooked. The man's left sleeve was subtly discoloured at the cuff, and a faint, almost invisible tattoo peeked out from beneath it, the stylized head of a ram with curling horns. The man was clearly in charge, and his words confirmed Holmes's suspicions. This was not a one-time operation, but a sophisticated, ongoing enterprise. The last of the old stock implied a transition, a shift in their modus operandi, perhaps to avoid detection. The new drop point suggested an expansion or a diversification of their illicit network. Suddenly, a small, rattling sound. Finn had finally forced the padlock open. With a creak, the lid of the metal trunk was thrown back. Inside, nestled amongst layers of straw, were gleaming, intricately carved wooden objects. They looked like small, miniature ships, but upon closer inspection they were far more elaborate, almost like works of art, highly detailed, with tiny, delicate sails and rigging. "The new toys, boss?" Finn asked, a hint of awe in his voice. The scarred man merely grunted, reaching into the trunk and pulling one out. He held it up to the lantern light. It was a perfect, exquisitely detailed replica of the sea serpent, even down to the minute etchings of the serpent and whirlpool on its hull. "These aren't toys, Finn," the boss said, his voice hard. "These are distractions, each one embedded with a tracker. When we need to create a stir, we let one loose downriver. Someone finds it, reports it, and the legend of the phantom ship continues. Keeps the authorities looking in the wrong direction while we move the real cargo." "But why bother, boss?" Finn questioned. "We already got the real ship to do that." "Because, you simpleton, we're expanding," the boss sneered. "And we need more widespread confusion. The sea serpent is good for the Thames. These little devils, they can go anywhere. There's coastal towns, other rivers. Keeps everyone guessing, and keeps the heat off our main operation." Holmes exchanged a quick, meaningful glance with Watson and Lestrade. The phantom ship was indeed a distraction, but a far more intricate one than we had imagined. Not just the large vessel, but a fleet of miniature phantoms, each carrying a digital breadcrumb designed to sow chaos and misdirection. This was a criminal mind of considerable cunning and resources. "Now, get the opium ready," the boss commanded. "The buyers will be here any minute, and then, We submerge her for the night. Last time for this old tub. Tomorrow she sails for good." "Sails, boss?" Finn asked, confused. "But I thought you said she was going down?" "For good, Finn, for good," the boss repeated, a grim smile spreading across his scarred face. "But not to the bottom of the Thames. She's got another destiny, a one-way trip, you might say." The implication hung heavy in the air. Thus, the sea serpent was to be intentionally sunk permanently, perhaps in a deeper, unrecoverable part of the Thames estuary, to erase all traces of their operation. This was their final night of using the phantom ship illusion. Our timing was extraordinarily fortuitous, or perhaps extraordinarily perilous. Holmes, with a swift, silent motion, produced a small silver whistle from his pocket. It was the signal for Lestrade's men, strategically positioned on the riverbank, to move in. "Now, Inspector," Holmes whispered, his voice resonating with quiet authority. "Your moment has arrived." Lestrade, with a fierce battle cry, surged forward, bursting from the concealed compartment. "Scotland Yard! You're under arrest!" The two criminals were caught completely by surprise. The scarred boss, agile despite his bulk, reacted instantly, drawing a large, ornate pistol from his coat. Finn, less quick-witted, froze, his eyes wide with terror. "Drop it, you fool!" Lestrade bellowed, his own revolver levelled. A deafening shot ripped through the confined space. The scarred boss fired, the bullet striking a timber above Lestrade's head with a splintering crack. The smaller man, Finn, let out a shriek and scrambled out of the hidden compartment, attempting to escape through the gaping hole in the hull. Holmes, with a speed that always astonished me, launched himself at the scarred man. His long, agile fingers, usually reserved for delicate chemical experiments, moved with blurring precision, seizing the man's wrist and twisting the pistol from his grasp. A brief, violent struggle ensued, punctuated by grunts and the thud of bodies against the rotting timbers. The boss was powerful, but Holmes's technique was flawless, his knowledge of anatomy rendering the man's strength impotent. With a final, sharp twist, Holmes applied a pressure point, and the scarred man cried out, his arm going limp. He collapsed to the floor, gasping. "A rather hasty retreat, Inspector," Holmes remarked, retrieving the fallen pistol and examining it, "but commendably effective. Watson, assist Lestrade with the apprehension of our more docile friend, and be wary of the smaller man. He may attempt to signal accomplices." As I moved to assist Lestrade in securing the struggling Finn, the sound of oars splashing frantically against the water grew louder from outside the sea serpent. Lestrade's men, having heard the gunshot, were closing in. Lanterns bobbed in the fog, casting an eerie glow on the surrounding waters. "Secure them both, Inspector," Holmes instructed, his gaze sweeping the hold. "And pay particular attention to the boss. He is clearly the mastermind of this operation, and I suspect he holds many more secrets than just the location of these opium bundles." Lestrade, his face flushed with triumph, quickly cuffed the scarred man and the whimpering Finn. "Well done, Holmes. Another feather in the cap of Scotland Yard, thanks to you." "A feather, Inspector, that has yet to be plucked," Holmes replied, his eyes still sharp, still searching. "We have apprehended 2 members of the syndicate, yes, but the network itself remains elusive, and the implications of this phantom ship extend far beyond simple smuggling. These miniature replicas, the elaborate deception, this points to a larger, more dangerous organization, one that manipulates perception as skillfully as it transports contraband." He picked up one of the miniature ship replicas from the open trunk, examining its intricate details. A truly exquisite piece of craftsmanship. Each one a tiny ghost, sailing the rivers of England, carrying nothing but a false trail. The man who designed these, and the mind that conceived of this entire phantom ship ruse, is no common criminal, Lestrade. He is an artist in deception, a master of illusion, and he, I fear, remains at large. As Lestrade's men boarded the Sea Serpent, their voices and the clang of their boots filling the once silent hold, the chill seemed to lessen, replaced by the faint warmth of impending victory. Yet Holmes's words resonated with a darker truth. This was merely the first glimpse behind the curtain of a larger, more sinister play. The phantom ship of the Thames had yielded its secrets, but in doing so it had unveiled a more formidable adversary, a criminal syndicate whose reach and methods were as intricate and elusive as the fabled sea serpent itself. Our adventure, it seemed, had only just begun. The pirate treasure, the ancient markings, the modern-day opium, all intertwined in a web of deceit that promised to test Holmes's deductive powers to their very limits. And I, John H. Watson, would be there to chronicle every thrilling moment. Act 2. The interrogation of Throckmorton. The aftermath of the raid on the Sea Serpent was a flurry of activity, Lestrade's men swarming the derelict vessel like a plague of locusts, securing the opium, and the bizarre miniature replicas of the Thames seemed to hold a newfound tension, a silent acknowledgement that a line had been crossed and the game had escalated. Back at Scotland Yard, the interrogation room was a stark, uninviting space, its bare walls and single unadorned table offering no solace to the accused. Inspector Lestrade, his earlier elation now tempered by the grim reality of the task at hand, sat opposite the man we had come to know as the boss, a hulking figure with a scarred face, now identified as Cyrus Throckmorton. He was a man whose very presence exuded a hardened menace, his eyes, cold and calculating, betraying nothing. Finn, his more pliable subordinate, had already been taken to another room, undoubtedly singing like a canary under the slightest pressure. But Throckmorton, Holmes knew, would be a far tougher nut to crack. Holmes, for his part, remained a silent observer, perched on a wooden chair in a corner, his gaze fixed on Throckmorton with the intensity of a predator studying its prey. He held no notebook, asked no questions, yet absorbed every subtle nuance of the man's posture, every flicker of emotion across his stony features. I, Watson, sat beside him, ready to chronicle the unfolding drama. "Right, Throckmorton," Lestrade began, his voice surprisingly calm, despite the evident frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "Let's not make this difficult. We've got the opium, we've got the miniature ships, we've got your accomplice, Finn, who, I might add, is rather keen to cooperate. It's over. Tell us who you're working for." Throckmorton merely grunted, a contemptuous sound that seemed to vibrate in the confined space. His gaze, unblinking, was fixed on a point beyond Lestrade's shoulder, as if he found the very act of acknowledging his interrogator beneath him. "We know this isn't a one-man operation, Throckmorton," Lestrade pressed, leaning forward. "This phantom ship ruse, the elaborate sinking and raising mechanism, these tracking devices in the toy ships, that takes resources. A network. Who's pulling the strings?" Finally, Throckmorton shifted his gaze, meeting Lestrade's eyes with a chillingly detached amusement. "Pulling strings, Inspector? I merely ply my trade. A merchant, you might say, in unconventional goods." His voice was a low, gravelly rasp, a sound that seemed to carry the very damp and chill of the Thames within it. "Unconventional indeed," Lestrade scoffed. "And the Sea Serpent? A convenient prop for your merchandise, I suppose? A ghost story to keep the bobbies at bay?" "A masterful illusion, wouldn't you agree?" Throckmorton countered, a faint, humourless smile touching his lips. "The populace, so eager for sensation. They see what they are told to see. A phantom, a curse, a pirate's hoard, while the true commerce flows unseen beneath their very noses." "And what of the ram tattoo, Throckmorton?" Holmes's voice, quiet but piercing, cut through the exchange. He had remained silent until this moment, and the sudden intervention seemed to startle Throckmorton. The man's eyes, which had held a mocking indifference, now flickered with a brief, almost imperceptible spark of caution. Throckmorton glanced down at his left wrist where the faint, stylized ram's head peeked from beneath his shirt cuff. "A personal mark," he grunted, a dismissive wave of his hand. "No concern of yours." "On the contrary, Mr. Throckmorton," Holmes countered, his gaze unwavering. "Details, however small, are rarely without significance. A ram with horns that twist inward, almost as if broken. A specific design, surely, not a common tattoo. Does it signify a family? A brotherhood? Perhaps an order of some distinction?" Throckmorton's jaw tightened, and for the first time a hint of genuine anger, swiftly masked, crossed his face. "You speak of things you do not understand, Detective. Some mysteries are best left undisturbed." "Indeed," Holmes said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "But it is precisely the undisturbed mysteries that often hold the most compelling truths. The inscription on the original Sea Serpent's log, of a great sea serpent guarding a hoard of untold riches on a cursed isle, that, too, speaks of ancient things. Coincidence, Mr. Throckmorton, that your modern smuggling operation uses the very same narrative elements as a pirate legend centuries old." Throckmorton remained silent, his eyes now narrowed, a flicker of something akin to respect, or perhaps grudging acknowledgement, replacing his earlier disdain. He was clearly assessing Holmes, weighing the depth of his knowledge. "The logbook of the original Sea Serpent," Holmes continued, pressing his advantage, "mentions not only the pirate lore but also a journey to the Mediterranean before its supposed disappearance in the Caribbean. A curious route for a Caribbean pirate, unless it was seeking something specific. Something other than gold, perhaps? Something of knowledge?" Throckmorton laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. "You spin tales, detective. We dealt in opium, plain and simple. Profit is the only treasure we seek." "I doubt that, Mr. Throckmorton," Holmes replied, his voice calm. "The scale of this operation, the intricate deception, the sheer audacity of it all, it suggests a deeper motivation than mere profit. This is not the work of common smugglers. This is the work of an organization with a grander design, a more ambitious objective. And that ram symbol, it is the key, is it not? A mark of allegiance, of belonging to something larger than oneself." Holmes leaned forward slightly, his eyes boring into Throckmorton's. "Consider this, Mr. Throckmorton. The original Sea Serpent, before its alleged Caribbean exploits, was reputedly involved in certain clandestine activities during the Anglo-Dutch Wars. Not simple piracy, but the transport of sensitive documents, of encoded messages. What if its true treasure was not gold, but information? And what if your current syndicate is not simply replicating a legend, but continuing a legacy? A legacy of secret knowledge passed down through generations, guarded by those who bear the mark of the Riven Ram." Throckmorton's impassive facade finally cracked. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and a muscle twitched in his jaw. He said nothing, but his silence was more eloquent than any confession. Holmes had struck a nerve. Lestrade, sensing the shift, jumped in. "Riven Ram? What in blazes are you talking about, Holmes?" "A theory, Lestrade, as yet unsubstantiated," Holmes replied without taking his eyes off Throckmorton. "But a theory that begins to account for the elaborate nature of this deception. Mr. Throckmorton, your syndicate has gone to extraordinary lengths to perpetuate a myth. Why? To simply move opium, or to cloak a deeper pursuit? What was the true one-way trip for the Sea Serpent? You said it would sail for good. To where? And why erase its traces so completely, if not to conceal something far more significant than a mere smuggling route?" Throckmorton closed his eyes for a long moment, then opened them, a grim resignation settling over his features. "You are a dangerous man, detective," he rasped. "You dig in places where ordinary men fear to tread. And you, Mr. Throckmorton, appear to be a man who, despite his loyalty, has been left to bear the brunt of others' schemes." Holmes countered, a hint of something akin to pity in his tone. "Tell us of the Order of the Riven Ram. Tell us of their true purpose." Throckmorton shook his head, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor passing through his massive frame. "I know nothing of an order," he mumbled, his defiance returning, albeit with less conviction. "Only that the job was to move the goods and keep the secret." "And the miniature ships?" Holmes pressed. "They contained trackers, to distract the authorities, you said. But what else, Mr. Throckmorton, are you referring to? What else do they track? What new cargo does this syndicate intend to acquire?" Throckmorton remained silent, his lips pressed into a thin, unyielding line. Despite Holmes's astute deductions, the man had clearly reached his limit for cooperation. The fear of his superiors, or the consequences of betrayal, was stronger than any legal pressure Lestrade could apply. "He won't talk, Holmes," Lestrade sighed, pushing back from the table. "Not about the real leaders anyway. He's too afraid, but we've got enough to put him away for a long time." "Indeed, Inspector," Holmes agreed, rising from his chair. "We have secured a valuable piece of the puzzle, but the larger picture, I fear, remains obscured. The Order of the Riven Ram, this requires further investigation. The ram tattoo is too specific to be mere coincidence. It suggests a structured organization, perhaps with roots stretching back centuries." The following day found Holmes immersed in a veritable ocean of historical texts and forgotten lore. Our sitting room, already a repository of arcana, now resembled a scholar's den, overflowing with dusty tomes on ancient guilds, obscure maritime societies, and forgotten heraldry. Holmes, oblivious to the chaos he had wrought, moved through it with the effortless grace of a master navigator, his mind a finely tuned instrument sifting through centuries of information. "Watson, he announced, holding aloft a fragile leather-bound volume, its pages brittle with age. "I believe I have found our elusive ram, not a common beast, but a specific symbolic representation. This volume, a forgotten treatise on obscure Elizabethan secret societies, speaks of the fraternity of the Riven Ram, a clandestine order reputedly founded by disaffected privateers and disgraced navigators in the late 16th century, bound by an oath to recover lost knowledge and redress ancient grievances. Their symbol, a ram with a single broken horn, or riven as they termed it, was meant to represent their split from established authority and their pursuit of a singular, often dangerous, truth." "Lost knowledge?" I queried, intrigued. "And ancient grievances? What sort of knowledge and grievances are we speaking of?" "The treatise is vague on specifics, Watson," Holmes replied, his eyes scanning the faded script. "It speaks of maps that charted not mere terrestrial land, but the very currents of influence, of documents that detailed the true balance of power in Europe beyond the visible machinations of kings and parliaments, and the grievances against the established maritime powers for perceived injustices, for knowledge suppressed or confiscated. This fraternity, it seems, believed themselves to be the true custodians of a hidden history, a hidden truth." "And what connection does this have to the sea serpent?" "Ah, the very crux of the matter. The treatise makes specific mention of the sea serpent as one of their most active vessels in the mid-17th century, not merely engaged in piracy, but in what they termed retrieval missions. These missions, it seems, involved the acquisition of documents or artifacts deemed vital to their cause. The legend of the great sea serpent guarding a hoard of untold riches on a cursed isle was, as I suspected, a deliberate fabrication. A highly effective one, too, designed to scare off casual treasure seekers while guiding their own operatives towards the true prize. So the original Sea Serpent was not merely a pirate vessel, but a ship of this fraternity of the Riven Ram? Precisely, Watson. And it makes perfect sense. The ship's disappearance off Hispaniola, rather than being an act of God or a stroke of ill luck, was likely a deliberate scuttling, to conceal its true cargo, to keep the lost knowledge out of the wrong hands. And the current syndicate, our modern-day criminals, are their direct descendants, or at the very least, inheritors of their legacy. They are not simply replicating a legend, they are living it, continuing the work of the Riven Ram. But what could this lost knowledge be, Holmes, that it justifies such elaborate and dangerous schemes centuries later? Holmes paced the room, his long fingers stroking his chin. That, my dear Watson, is the grand question. It is clearly something of immense value, something that transcends mere gold or jewels. Information can be more potent than any weapon, more valuable than any treasure. Perhaps it is a secret that could destabilize governments or reshape the balance of power. The very fact that the syndicate now employs modern tracking technology in their miniature ships, yet relies on an ancient legend, suggests a peculiar blend of old and new. They are using cutting-edge methods to pursue an archaic goal. A new line of inquiry opened for Holmes. He dispatched a telegram to a retired maritime historian known for his encyclopedic knowledge of forgotten naval fraternities and obscure pirate lore. He also instructed Lestrade to initiate a quiet, discreet inquiry into any individuals in London who bore similar, unusual tattoos. The answer to Holmes's queries arrived sooner and far more dramatically than we anticipated. It came in the form of a package delivered to Baker Street, not by the usual postman, but by a grimy, anonymous urchin who vanished into the labyrinthine alleys before Mrs. Hudson could question him. The package was small, wrapped in coarse canvas and tied with a thick, tarred rope. Holmes opened it with meticulous care, his keen eyes scanning for any hint of a trap. Inside, nestled on a bed of damp river mud, was a grotesque object, the severed head of a ram, its single broken horn exactly matching the Riven Ram symbol. Its eyes, glazed and vacant, seemed to stare accusingly. Tied around its neck, a small parchment scroll, crudely rolled and sealed with dark wax. Mrs. Hudson, peering over my shoulder, let out a strangled cry. "Mercy me, Mr. Holmes! What abomination is this?" "A message, Mrs. Hudson," Holmes said, his voice unusually calm, almost detached, as he unrolled the scroll, and a most unambiguous one. The note, scrawled in a bold, assertive hand, read, "The ram watches, the serpent strikes. Dig deeper, detective, and find yourself at the bottom of the Thames. The order will not be disrupted." A chilling silence descended upon the room. This was no mere threat from common thugs. This was a calculated personal warning from the mastermind, demonstrating not only their awareness of Holmes's investigation, but also their ruthless determination. "They know, Holmes," I said, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. "They know we have Throckmorton. They know you're on to the Riven Ram." "Indeed, Watson," Holmes replied, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous intensity that I had learned to recognize as a prelude to his most formidable intellectual battles. "And they are attempting to intimidate us. A rather crude display of bravado, I must say, for an organization that prides itself on subtlety. This suggests a certain desperation, or perhaps an arrogance born of unchallenged power." He examined the ram's head more closely. "The cuts are fresh, Watson, executed with a clean, sharp blade. This ram was likely slaughtered very recently, and the mud, characteristic of the riverbank, perhaps near the site of the sea serpent's operations. A clear connection, designed to reinforce their message." "What does this mean for our safety, Holmes?" Mrs. Hudson asked, her voice trembling. "It means, Mrs. Hudson," Holmes said, a rare reassuring note in his tone, "that our adversaries are aware of our presence, and thus our every move will now be under scrutiny. We must proceed with extreme caution. But fear not, this merely adds fuel to the fire. An opponent who resorts to such theatrical threats is an opponent who fears exposure." He folded the note carefully and placed it in his pocket. "This changes the complexion of the case entirely. We are no longer merely pursuing smugglers. We are confronting a clandestine organization, a secret society with deep roots and a ruthless agenda." The following days were a whirlwind of intense research and covert surveillance. Holmes, now fully aware of the syndicate's monitoring, adopted an almost theatrical approach to his movements, creating false trails, discreetly observing his own shadows, and employing a series of elaborate disguises to move unnoticed through London's bustling streets. He made frequent, seemingly innocuous visits to the British Museum, poring over ancient maps and maritime records, and to the Royal Geographical Society, consulting obscure journals on historical exploration and forgotten trade routes. His inquiries into the fraternity of the Riven Ram began to yield disturbing insights. The initial treatise he had found was merely the tip of the iceberg. He uncovered scattered references in forgotten parish records, in the marginalia of naval dispatches from the 17th century, and even in the coded correspondence of minor aristocratic families. The fraternity, it seemed, had been more influential and far-reaching than initially suggested, with a network of operatives extending across Europe and into the burgeoning colonial territories. They were not merely disgruntled privateers, but ideologues who believed in the overthrow of established intellectual and political orders, seeking to establish a new world order based on their lost knowledge. "The lost knowledge, Watson," Holmes explained one evening, gesturing to a particularly complex genealogical chart he had meticulously constructed. "It appears to be a series of encoded maps and navigational charts, not for physical locations of treasure, but for the location of key historical events, the precise timing of celestial alignments, and even the patterns of human migration. They believed that by understanding these currents of influence, they could predict and manipulate future events. A rather grandiose and, frankly, dangerous philosophy." "So they were attempting to control destiny," I mused. "In a manner of speaking, yes," Holmes affirmed. "Their original goal was to recover the fragments of this lost knowledge that they believed had been deliberately suppressed by the Crown and the Church. The Sea Serpent, it appears, was their primary vessel for these retrieval missions, and its final deliberate sinking off Hispaniola was to prevent a particularly crucial piece of this knowledge from falling into the wrong hands. And now, centuries later, their descendants are seeking to complete that work?" "Precisely, and with modern means. The miniature ships with their trackers, they are not merely distractions. They are instruments for reconnaissance. They are being released not just to confuse, but to locate something specific, something that corresponds to the fragments of the lost knowledge, perhaps a final piece that remains undiscovered." Lestrade, meanwhile, had had limited success with his inquiries into unusual tattoos. The ram symbol was too rare, too obscure for common recognition. However, the information regarding the order of the Riven Ram had sent a chill through the yard. The Commissioner, initially sceptical, was now gravely concerned, recognising the implications of such an ancient and ruthless syndicate operating within London. "We've increased patrols on the Thames, Holmes," Lestrade reported, his face etched with worry. "And our intelligence network is on high alert. But these chaps are slippery. No one's seen or heard of anything like this Riven Ram for centuries. It's like they truly are ghosts." "They are anything but ghosts, Lestrade," Holmes corrected grimly. "They are flesh and blood, well-funded and highly organised. Their current operations are merely a facade, a means to an end. The opium smuggling is a way to fund their true objective, the recovery of the complete lost knowledge, which they believe will grant them unparalleled power and influence." As Holmes delved deeper into the history of the Riven Ram, a pattern began to emerge, a subtle thread connecting the historical fraternity to a prominent family in contemporary London society. It was a family known for its philanthropic endeavours, its vast shipping empire, and its seemingly impeccable reputation. The more Holmes dug, the more the pieces clicked into place. The key, he discovered, lay in the family crest of the Montague shipping dynasty. While their public crest featured a majestic galleon, Holmes, through meticulous research in ancient heraldic archives, uncovered an earlier private crest, one almost entirely erased from official records, a ram with a subtly broken horn, the same distinctive ram as Throckmorton's tattoo. "Watson, the pieces are aligning with a dreadful precision," Holmes announced one morning, his voice low and intense. He gestured to a series of documents spread across his desk, old shipping ledgers, genealogical trees, and newspaper clippings. The Montague family. Their fortune was founded in the late 17th century, precisely when the original fraternity of the Riven Ram was at its zenith. Their initial wealth, reputedly amassed through expeditions to the New World, matches perfectly with the retrieval missions of the Sea Serpent. "Are you suggesting," I began, my mind struggling to grasp the enormity of it, "that the Montague family is the modern incarnation of the Riven Ram?" "Not merely an incarnation, Watson," Holmes corrected, his eyes narrowed in thought, "but the very heart of it. They have preserved the lost knowledge through generations, acquiring fragments, deciphering codes, and preparing for the moment when they could finally reconstruct the entire mosaic. Their shipping empire provides the perfect cover, the necessary resources, and the global reach to facilitate their illicit activities and their deeper, more insidious agenda." He pointed to a faded photograph of a distinguished elderly gentleman, Lord Arthur Montague, the current patriarch of the dynasty, a man revered in London society for his charitable works and his keen business acumen. "And the mastermind, I believe, is none other than this man, Lord Arthur Montague. A wolf in sheep's clothing, Watson. His public persona as a benevolent industrialist provides the perfect camouflage for his true identity as the leader of a ruthless, centuries-old secret society." The revelation sent a shiver down my spine. Lord Montague was beyond reproach, a pillar of the community. The thought that such a man could be orchestrating a vast criminal enterprise, one rooted in ancient conspiracies, was almost inconceivable. "But what is their ultimate goal, Holmes?" I pressed. "If it's not simply profit, and not simply lost knowledge for its own sake, what is the power they seek?" Holmes paused, his gaze fixed on Lord Montague's photograph. "The power, Watson, to manipulate, to shape events. The lost knowledge, I believe, contains a series of algorithms, of predictions based on the currents of influence, economic, political, social. Imagine possessing the ability to foresee market crashes, to predict political upheavals, to even orchestrate them. This is not about brute force, but about subtle, pervasive control. The opium smuggling is merely a means to an end, a lucrative side venture that funds their grander, more terrifying ambition." "And the miniature ships?" "Ah, the miniature ships. The final pieces of the puzzle. They are designed to track specific environmental factors, perhaps minute gravitational anomalies, unusual atmospheric pressures, or even subtle magnetic but highly targeted probes, each programmed to search for a specific signature, a specific fragment of the lost knowledge that is still hidden, perhaps in some forgotten vault, or buried beneath some long-lost landmark." The cursed isle in the original log was likely a metaphorical reference to a location where such a fragment was concealed. Holmes's words painted a chilling picture. A shadowy organisation, led by a man of immense power and influence, systematically gathering ancient secrets with modern technology to seize control of the future. The Phantom ship was merely the most visible manifestation of their audacious scheme. "We need proof, Holmes," Lestrade declared, having arrived shortly after Holmes's revelation, his face pale with shock at the implications. "Direct evidence linking Lord Montague to this order of the Riven Ram and to the smuggling operation. His reputation is unblemished." "And that, Lestrade, is precisely his greatest shield," Holmes replied, a grim resolve hardening his features. "We have the miniature ships, the opium, Throckmorton's tacit admission, and the historical connection. But to touch Lord Montague, we need a smoking gun, a direct link to his orchestrating mind, and I believe I know where we might find it." Holmes picked up the ancient, water-stained logbook of the original sea serpent that had been found in the hidden compartment. "This log, Watson, speaks of the cursed isle and the hoard of untold riches. And now we understand that the riches are not gold, but fragments of knowledge. The original sea serpent was scuttled to prevent a crucial piece from being seized. But what if that piece was never recovered? What if it remained with the sunken ship, waiting for the order to return centuries later to retrieve it?" He pointed to a precise entry in the logbook, accompanied by a crude, annotated map. "This entry, dated shortly before the ship's final voyage, speaks of a final resting place, a deep slumber beneath the Serpent's Eye. A specific location, Lestrade, in the deeper waters of the Thames estuary, far from casual navigation. The same location where, I suspect, our modern sea serpent was intended to be scuttled this very night." "You mean they were going to sink it there to retrieve something else?" I asked, a sudden realization dawning on me. "Precisely, Watson. They were completing the final act of their deception. The one-way trip for the ship was not merely to destroy evidence of smuggling, but to perform a final retrieval mission, to recover the very last crucial fragment of the lost knowledge that the original sea serpent was meant to protect. It was a centuries-long waiting game, and we, by capturing Throckmorton and the ship, have inadvertently disrupted the grand finale." "So, the miniature ships were searching for this spot?" Lestrade clarified. "They were conducting a highly precise survey, Lestrade, locating the exact point where the original sea serpent lies, and with it, the final fragment of the Riven Ram's hidden knowledge. Their current-day Phantom ship was merely a temporary prop, a means to access that specific location without suspicion. The Ram's head warning was not merely a threat, it was a desperate attempt to deter us from their true final objective. The implications were staggering. We had stumbled upon a conspiracy that transcended mere crime, delving into the very fabric of history and ambition. The Phantom ship, once a simple curiosity, had become the entry point into a world of hidden societies, ancient secrets, and a ruthless pursuit of power. The battle, it seemed, was not merely against opium smugglers, but against the very architects of societal manipulation. "We must move quickly, Lestrade," Holmes declared, his eyes burning with renewed purpose. "Lord Montague will be aware of our actions. He will undoubtedly attempt to secure that final fragment before we can intervene. We must intercept him, and in doing so, expose the true nature of the Order of the Riven Ram." He began gathering his equipment, his magnifying glass, his dissecting tools, and a worn leather case containing a series of meticulously crafted instruments of his own design. "The Thames, Watson, still holds its secrets, but tonight, I fancy, one of its oldest and most dangerous will finally be brought to light. Our adventure, far from reaching its conclusion, was merely escalating, drawing us deeper into the perilous waters of a long-forgotten conspiracy and a very modern threat. The shadow of the Riven Ram had truly fallen over London. Act 3. The Phantom Ship of the Thames. The revelation of Lord Arthur Montague as the true mastermind behind the Order of the Riven Ram, and the chilling understanding of their centuries-long pursuit of lost knowledge, cast a long, disquieting shadow over Baker Street. The air hummed with a tension far greater than that brought by any common criminal pursuit. This was a battle not merely against a syndicate, but against a philosophy, a historical continuity of manipulation that had now, quite literally, surfaced from the depths. Holmes, far from being daunted, seemed invigorated by the sheer audacity of their foe. His eyes, usually cool and analytical, now burned with a fierce, almost vengeful light. He paced our sitting room, a whirlwind of restless energy, occasionally pausing to consult a series of intricately detailed nautical charts spread across the floor. These were not the common maps of the Thames, but archaic hydrographic surveys, riddled with annotations in faded ink, detailing obscure currents, forgotten shoals, and the shifting sands of the estuary. "The Thames estuary, Watson," he declared, tapping a precise point on one of the charts with a slender finger. "A treacherous labyrinth of shifting channels and submerged secrets. Few vessels dare to linger there, save for the most seasoned mariners. It is the perfect theatre for Lord Montague's final act. The Serpent's Eye, as the original log terms it, suggests a specific, almost mythical landmark. A deep-water trench, perhaps, or a unique confluence of currents that creates a perpetual vortex. Precisely the sort of place where a centuries-old secret might be concealed." Lestrade, his usual bulldog tenacity somewhat subdued by the sheer magnitude of the conspiracy, sat slumped in an armchair, staring at the map with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "So, Holmes, you believe this final fragment is still down there? After all these years?" "Indeed, Inspector," Holmes affirmed, his gaze unwavering. "The original sea serpent was scuttled with a specific purpose, to safeguard this fragment from falling into the hands of those not of the Riven Ram. They would not have left it to chance. The log suggests a precise method of concealment, a deep slumber, ensuring its preservation. And the modern syndicate's meticulous search with the miniature trackers confirms its continued presence. Lord Montague, the diligent inheritor of this dubious legacy, would ensure its ultimate recovery." "And you think he'll go for it tonight?" I asked, looking at the ominous forecast of thick fog rolling in from the North Sea. "It is highly probable, Watson," Holmes replied, his voice grim. "Our disruption of his phantom ship operation was a significant blow. He knows we are aware of his identity and his grand design. To leave the final, crucial fragment unrecovered would be an unacceptable risk for a man of his ambition. He will act swiftly, under the cover of the approaching fog, to secure his prize, and I fear to permanently erase any remaining traces of his involvement. Our task is to intercept him before he can complete his centuries-long quest." Holmes turned to Lestrade. "Inspector, I shall require a vessel capable of deep-water navigation in the estuary, and a crew of your most reliable and, dare I say, least would be an invaluable asset. An equipment for underwater illumination and recovery. Speed and absolute discretion are paramount." Lestrade, despite his anxieties, rose to the challenge. "It'll be difficult, Holmes. The estuary is no place for a Sunday outing, but I'll get you the best we have, and I'll come myself. This Montague, he's too big to let slip away." "Excellent, Inspector," Holmes nodded. "Your presence will be most welcome. Watson, prepare your instruments. This journey, I suspect, will be one for the annals." The moon was a mere rumour behind a shroud of impenetrable fog as we made our way to a desolate wharf further downriver, where Lestrade had arranged for our transport. The chosen vessel was the Osprey, a sturdy coal-fired steam launch, less graceful than the Waterman, but built for resilience against the treacherous currents and the unpredictable moods of the estuary. Her crew, hand-picked by Lestrade, were grim-faced but competent men, their faces etched with the hard lessons of the Thames. Among them were 2 Royal Navy divers, clad in their heavy canvas suits, their helmets gleaming dully in the gaslight, their presence a stark reminder of the perils ahead. The journey downriver was slow and arduous. The fog, thick and cloying, swallowed the lights of London behind us, reducing the world to a small, isolated bubble around the Osprey. The mournful wail of the foghorn pierced the silence at regular intervals, a lonely lament in the vast emptiness. The air grew colder, the scent of coal smoke mingling with the sharp, saline tang of the open sea. Holmes stood at the bow, a solitary sentinel, his profile stark against the swirling grey, his eyes, I knew, piercing the veil of mist with an almost supernatural acuity. He consulted the old chart repeatedly, comparing its faded lines with the subtle eddies and currents that whispered past the Osprey's hull. "The Serpent's Eye, Watson," Holmes murmured, gesturing vaguely ahead. "It is not a fixed point on any modern chart. It is a dynamic confluence, a point where the river's deep channel meets an unusual geological depression, creating a swirling vortex beneath the surface. The Riven Ram would have chosen it for its natural concealment and its difficulty of access. They designed the scuttling of the original sea serpent to coincide with a specific tidal flow that would pull it precisely into this subaquatic maw. After what seemed an eternity, Holmes suddenly raised a hand. "Here, Silas, ease speed. We are approaching the approximate coordinates." Silas, who was at the helm, nodded, and the Osprey's engine throttled back, her powerful thrum softening to a low murmur. The silence that followed was broken only by the lapping of the water against the hull and the distant unseen rush of the open sea. The fog, as if on cue, began to thin slightly, revealing a small area of agitated water. A peculiar disturbance, a subtle, almost imperceptible swirling that seemed at odds with the relatively calm surface around it. It was like an eye, indeed, a dark liquid iris staring up from the abyss. "The Serpent's Eye," Holmes breathed, his voice barely audible. "Precisely as described." As the Osprey drifted closer, a peculiar glint caught my eye. Ahead, barely discernible through the thinning mist, was another vessel. Not the Sea Serpent, but a modern, sleek steam yacht, its dark hull almost invisible against the gloomy waters. Its engine, however, was clearly audible, a low, powerful drone. "Montague," Lestrade whispered, drawing his revolver. "He's here." Indeed, lights now flickered on the yacht's deck, illuminating figures moving purposefully. There was a faint metallic clang, then the whine of machinery. A large, complex crane arm, equipped with a powerful grappling claw, was slowly extending over the yacht's side, disappearing into the dark water. They were attempting to retrieve something from the depths. "They are already at work," Holmes observed, his voice devoid of surprise. "He is as swift as he is ruthless. Lestrade, bring the Osprey alongside, silently as you can. We must board them before they recover the fragment, and instruct your divers to be ready." Silas expertly manoeuvred the Osprey, using the cover of the remaining fog and the noise of the yacht's machinery to mask our approach. We drew alongside Montague's vessel, the Hydra, with astonishing stealth. The yacht was larger than our launch, its deck well lit, but the figures on board were entirely focused on the operation unfolding beneath the waves. As we clambered onto the Hydra's deck, our footsteps muffled by the pervasive dampness, the scene became clearer. Lord Arthur Montague himself stood at the railing, his patrician features illuminated by the deck lights, his customary composure now replaced by a tense, almost feverish anticipation. He was overseeing the crane operation, his eyes fixed on the murky waters below. Beside him stood several burly, silent men, his personal guard, no doubt. Among them, to my astonishment, was Throckmorton, battered but clearly recovered, his presence a testament to Montague's influence and ability to secure his release or simply retrieve him from the yard's custody. "Montague!" Lestrade bellowed, his voice ringing out across the deck. "Scotland Yard, you are under arrest!" Lord Montague started, turning sharply, his eyes widening in a rare display of shock. Throckmorton, quicker to react, drew a concealed blade, but Holmes was already in motion. "A rather predictable entrance, Inspector," Holmes remarked, a faint, sardonic smile on his lip, as he deftly disarmed Throckmorton with a swift, almost invisible movement, the blade clattering harmlessly to the deck, though commendable in its directness. Lord Montague, regaining his composure with remarkable speed, merely raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, Inspector Lestrade, a most unexpected pleasure, though I confess I had anticipated a greater challenge from the esteemed Scotland Yard than a mere raid on a dilapidated vessel. To what do I owe this rather dramatic intrusion upon my private expedition?" "Your private expedition, Lord Montague," Holmes countered, his voice sharp and precise, "is merely the culmination of a centuries-old conspiracy. The Order of the Riven Ram, your lost knowledge, and the systematic manipulation of events from the shadows. We are here to prevent you from seizing the final piece of your insidious puzzle." Lord Montague's eyes glinted with a cold, almost reptilian amusement. "Lost knowledge? My dear Mr. Holmes, you spin a most fascinating tale. I am merely engaged in a legitimate salvage operation, a personal historical interest, you understand." "A salvage operation for a phantom ship, Lord Montague?" I interjected, unable to contain my indignation. And the opium on board, and the miniature tracking devices designed to sow misdirection. Montague's smile did not falter, but a subtle hardening came into his eyes. Regrettable incidents, I assure you, petty criminals no doubt, who took advantage of my unconventional research. As for the opium, a clear case of opportunism. The miniatures? Mere trinkets, a whimsical hobby. You paint a grand conspiracy where none exists, Mr. Holmes. The severed ram's head delivered to Baker Street suggests otherwise. Lord Montague, Holmes stated, his voice devoid of emotion. A rather unsubtle warning, wouldn't you say, for a man who prides himself on subtlety? It betrays a certain desperation. You know we are close. Montague's facade finally cracked, a flicker of genuine anger passing across his face. You overstep, detective. My patience is not inexhaustible. He gestured to his guards. Remove these intruders. A brief, brutal struggle ensued. Lestrade's men, despite being fewer in number, fought with the righteous fury of the law, while Montague's guards, though formidable, lacked the disciplined agility, moved like a shadow, disabling 2 guards with swift, precise blows to their pressure points. I, Watson, though a humble chronicler, found myself reverting to my old military instincts, my fists finding their mark against a burly ruffian. During the skirmish, Throckmorton, who had been momentarily stunned, seized an opportunity. With a desperate lunge, he scrambled towards the railing, where the crane cable disappeared into the water, attempting to sever it with a concealed cutting tool. "The cable, Lestrade," Holmes barked, noticing Throckmorton's desperate act. "He means to destroy the evidence." Lestrade, seeing the danger, lunged after Throckmorton, but the man was surprisingly agile. A Royal Navy diver, having just suited up and about to descend, saw Throckmorton's intent. With a surprising burst of speed for his cumbersome gear, he tackled Throckmorton, sending both men crashing into the railing. The cutting tool flew from Throckmorton's hand and disappeared into the murky depths. "Curse you, Throckmorton!" Montague snarled, momentarily distracted from the melee. "You fool! The fragment must be recovered." This momentary lapse in Montague's attention was all Holmes needed. With a sudden burst of speed, he moved past the struggling figures, his eyes fixed on a small, ornate wooden box that Montague had been clutching prior to our arrival. The box, intricately carved with the familiar Riven Ram symbol, sat on a small table near the controls of the crane. "The log, Lestrade," Holmes cried. "The final piece." He lunged for the box, but Montague, recovering swiftly, attempted to block him, his face contorted in a mask of fury. Despite his age, the man possessed a surprising strength born of desperation. He threw a punch, which Holmes easily dodged. "You will not have it, detective," Montague snarled, his voice a low hiss. "Centuries of work will not be undone by a meddling amateur." "Amateur, Lord Montague?" Holmes retorted, his eyes flashing. "Hardly. Merely an observer of human folly, and your folly, I fear, is the belief that knowledge can truly be controlled." With a final, expertly placed blow, Holmes struck Montague's wrist, sending a sharp crack echoing across the deck. The old man cried out, clutching his hand, and the carved wooden box flew from his grasp, sliding across the wet deck towards the edge of the yacht. "The box!" I shouted, instinctively lunging forward, my fingers brushing against the cold, wet wood as it teetered precariously on the brink. With a desperate grab, I managed to snatch it back, securing it just before it plunged into the dark waters of the estuary. "Excellent work, Watson!" Holmes exclaimed, his relief evident. Montague, recovering from the blow, glared at Holmes, his face a mask of bitter hatred. "You have no idea what you have unleashed, detective. This knowledge, it is too powerful for ordinary minds. It must be controlled. By us." "Knowledge, Lord Montague," Holmes replied, straightening his coat, "is a river, not a reservoir. It flows, it does not stagnate, and any attempt to dam it for personal gain inevitably leads to a torrent of consequences." Meanwhile, Lestrade and his men had finally subdued Montague's guards and secured Throckmorton. The 2 Navy divers, their bulky suits making them appear like deep-sea leviathans, now stood ready. "The crane, Holmes," Lestrade reported, breathing heavily. "They were still pulling something up. The cable's still taut. Should we bring it in?" "Indeed, Inspector," Holmes confirmed, his gaze fixed on the cable. "That, I believe, is the final fragment. Retrieve it, and then we shall examine what centuries of ambition have wrought." The massive grappling claw slowly ascended from the depths, dripping with cold black water, its steel jaws clutching a bizarre encrusted object. It was not a chest of gold, nor a simple scroll, but a complex, almost crystalline structure about the size of a man's head, pulsating with a faint inner luminescence. It was covered in barnacles and marine growth, but beneath the grime I could discern intricate geometric patterns, swirling lines, and what appeared to be tiny, embedded metallic spheres. "By Jove, Holmes," I breathed, utterly captivated. "What is it?" "The lost knowledge, Watson," Holmes murmured, a note of profound contemplation in his voice. "Or at least its physical manifestation, the algorithms of influence, the currents of destiny, a device, centuries ahead of its time, designed to capture and analyze environmental and perhaps even social data, predicting future trends with an accuracy that would grant its possessor unprecedented power." As the object was carefully brought onto the deck, the divers, with the aid of Lestrade's men, set about cleaning it. With each layer of marine growth removed, the object's true nature became clearer. It was not mere rock or crystal, but a meticulously crafted automaton, a marvel of ancient engineering and arcane science. Its surface revealed an intricate network of moving gears and subtle conduits, almost alive with a faint internal hum. "It is a form of ancient computational device," Holmes declared, kneeling beside it, his magnifying glass pressed against its surface. "Powered, perhaps, by a self-sustaining chemical reaction, or some hitherto unknown form of galvanic energy. These spherical inlays, they are likely sensitive sensors, designed to detect minute fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field, atmospheric pressures, perhaps even the subtle shifts in human collective consciousness, as implied by the Riven Ram's philosophy." He opened the carved wooden box I had recovered. Inside, nestled on a velvet cushion, was a single intricately designed brass key, its head shaped like a miniature broken ram's horn. "The key, Watson," Holmes announced, carefully inserting it into a small, concealed aperture on the crystal device. With a soft click, the device hummed louder, and intricate patterns of light, like miniature constellations, began to pulse across its surface. "It's activating," Lestrade said, a tremor in his voice. "Indeed," Holmes replied, his eyes rapt with fascination. "And observe the patterns. They are not random. They are shifting, calculating, predicting. This is the heart of the Riven Ram's ambition, Lestrade. The power to foresee and thus to manipulate. Imagine a world governed by such a device, its truths known only to a select few. Governments would rise and fall, markets would crash, and wars would be waged, all according to the dictates of this unholy oracle." Lord Montague, who had been watching from where he was restrained, now spoke, his voice hoarse but filled with a strange, fervent pride. "You see, detective, the ultimate truth, the path to true order. The world is chaos, a maelstrom of unpredictable forces, but with this we bring order, we guide destiny. You, in your petty investigations, merely scratch the surface of reality. We delve into its very core." "And at what cost, Lord Montague?" Holmes countered, turning to face him. "The cost of individual liberty? The suppression of free will? A world dictated by an algorithm, however complex, is a world devoid of humanity." As Holmes and Montague debated the philosophical implications of the device, I noticed something else on its surface. Among the intricate patterns and glowing lights, there were faint, almost imperceptible symbols that resembled ancient script. With my medical eye, accustomed to dissecting complex diagrams, I recognized a peculiar sequence, a series of 5 distinct symbols, each repeating. "Holmes!" I exclaimed, pointing. "Look here, these symbols, they're not just decorative, they're a repeating sequence." Holmes knelt closer, his magnifying glass moving swiftly over the pattern. His eyes, usually sharp, widened almost imperceptibly. "By Jove, Watson, you have a keen eye." These are a 5-digit key, repeated precisely 50 times around the central axis of the device. He paused, then his gaze snapped to Montague. "This device, Lord Montague, is not merely a predictor. It is also a key. A key to what?" Montague's face, already pale, turned a shade of ashen grey. His eyes, which had held a fanatical gleam, now flickered with a raw, desperate fear. "No, it cannot be. He wouldn't. The final safeguard." "What final safeguard, Lord Montague?" Holmes pressed, his voice like steel. "What does this device unlock?" Montague remained silent, his lips trembling, his gaze fixed on the pulsating artifact with a profound terror. It was clear that Holmes had stumbled upon a secret far deeper, far more dangerous than even Montague had fully comprehended. The lost knowledge was not just about prediction, it was about activation. "The serpent's eye," Holmes murmured, his eyes sweeping the dark, swirling waters around us, then back to the device. "And the Riven Ram." The serpent, the ram, two ancient symbols of power and knowledge. This device, Lord Montague, is not just a mechanism for controlling destiny. It is a failsafe, designed to be triggered should the Order's true ultimate secret be compromised. He turned to Lestrade, his voice grim. "Inspector, this device is of immense danger. Its true function is clearly more than predictive. It must be secured and examined with the utmost caution. And Lord Montague, he holds the key to its true purpose, beyond merely lost knowledge." As if on cue, a sudden violent shudder ran through the Hydra. The yacht groaned, timbers protesting. From below deck, a muffled explosion reverberated, sending a cloud of thick, acrid smoke billowing up through the hatches. "What was that?" Lestrade cried, startled. "A self-destruct mechanism, perhaps?" I ventured, recalling Holmes's earlier mention of the original sea serpent's deliberate scuttling. "More likely, Watson, a final desperate act by one of Montague's loyalists," Holmes said, his eyes scanning the deck. "Or perhaps Throckmorton, ever the wild card, had a contingency of his own. This yacht is compromised. We must abandon ship and secure the artifact." Pandemonium erupted on the Hydra. Alarms blared and the lights flickered erratically. Montague's remaining guards, seeing their vessel was doomed, threw down their arms in panic, scrambling for the lifeboats. Throckmorton, seeing the chaos, used it as an opportunity. With a desperate surge, he broke free from Lestrade's grip, and with a chilling cry of "For the Order," leapt overboard, disappearing into the dark, swirling waters of the estuary. "Throckmorton!" Lestrade shouted, rushing to the railing, but the fog had already swallowed the desperate man. "Let him go, Inspector!" Holmes commanded, his voice sharp. "He is merely a pawn. The device is our priority." Our Royal Navy divers, despite the chaos, acted with admirable presence of mind. They swiftly secured the glowing artifact in a reinforced canvas bag, carefully lowering it into the Osprey. Lestrade's men, now reinforced by additional officers from our launch, quickly rounded up Montague and his remaining disoriented guards. As we clambered back onto the Osprey, the sound of splintering wood and rushing water confirmed the Hydra's rapid descent. Within minutes, the sleek yacht, once a symbol of Montague's power, was swallowed by the Thames, leaving only a lingering plume of smoke and the agitated serpent's eye as its epitaph. "A clean sweep, Holmes," Lestrade said, wiping his brow, as the Osprey pulled away from the sinking yacht. "Montague apprehended, the opium seized, and this contraption secured." "Indeed, Inspector," Holmes replied, his gaze fixed on the covered artifact. "A significant victory. But the true nature of this lost knowledge, and the ultimate objective of the Order of the Riven Ram, remains partially obscured. The fear in Montague's eyes when you pointed out that repeating sequence, that was genuine, Watson. A deeper secret, even for him. This device is not merely a tool for prediction. It is a key to something far more fundamental, something that even the head of the Riven Ram feared to contemplate." The serpent's eye churned behind us, a dark, swirling vortex on the face of the Thames. We had recovered the final piece of the Riven Ram's grand puzzle, but in doing so, we had opened a new, more unsettling door. The lost knowledge was not just about history or prophecy. It held a terrifying potential, a final safeguard that Lord Montague himself seemed unaware of, or too afraid to reveal. The full implications of the Riven Ram's ambition and the true power of the artifact we now possessed would undoubtedly unfold in the acts to come. Our adventure had taken a turn into the truly extraordinary. Act 4. The Oracle and the Paradox. The journey back up the Thames on the Osprey was markedly different from our descent. The earlier tension had given way to a profound sense of awe and a lingering unease. Lord Arthur Montague, now tightly bound and under Lestrade's watchful eye, remained defiantly silent, his face a grim mask of resentment and defeat. The true focus of our attention, however, rested on the heavily secured artifact, the crystalline device, now pulsating with a steady internal luminescence, its intricate patterns of light shifting like a celestial map. It was covered with a thick tarpaulin, but its presence dominated the cramped confines of the launch. Back at Scotland Yard, the utmost secrecy was maintained. The artifact was transported to a specially secured vault, one usually reserved for the most dangerous of chemical compounds or the most volatile of explosives. Lestrade, fully grasping the gravity of the situation, personally oversaw its installation, allowing only Holmes, myself, and a small team of Royal Society scientists, sworn to absolute discretion, to enter. The vault was sterile and cold, illuminated by a single, powerful incandescent lamp that cast stark shadows across the faces of the assembled experts. The artifact, now resting on a reinforced steel table, seemed to hum with an ancient yet distinctly mechanical energy. Its intricate gears whirred almost imperceptibly, and the constellation-like lights danced across its surface with renewed intensity. "Gentlemen," Holmes announced, his voice imbued with a rare solemnity, "we stand before what the Order of the Riven Ram refers to as the Lost Knowledge. A device, centuries ahead of its time, designed to interpret the algorithms of influence and predict future trends. But as we discovered, its function appears to extend beyond mere prognostication." He gestured to the peculiar 5-digit sequence that I had first observed. This repeating code, etched into its very structure, suggests a secondary, perhaps more profound purpose. Professor Alastair Finch, a renowned horologist and expert in ancient mechanisms, leaned forward, his spectacles glinting in the light. "Remarkable, Mr. Holmes, the precision of these internal workings, the almost organic fluidity of its components. It defies all known engineering principles of its supposed era. It is as if it were forged not by human hands, but by some alien intelligence." Dr. Eleanor Vance, a leading cryptographer and linguist, ran a gloved finger over the intricate symbols. "These symbols, Mr. Holmes, are not a known script. Yet, the repeating sequence, it has the hallmarks of a numerical or perhaps even an alchemical cipher. The 5 digits suggest a base 5 system, or a series of 5 distinct operations." "Precisely, Dr. Vance," Holmes concurred, and Lord Montague, when confronted with this sequence, displayed a level of fear that transcended mere apprehension of capture. It was a terror born of genuine shock, as if he had stumbled upon a truth he himself, something he believed he would never trigger. "Who is he, Mr. Holmes?" Lestrade interjected, his brow furrowed. "Another figure in this Riven Ram? Someone even above Montague?" "A crucial question, Inspector," Holmes replied, his gaze returning to the artifact. "And one that, I believe, this device holds the answer to. The Riven Ram's philosophy, as I've deduced from their ancient texts, posited that true power lay not in overt control, but in the subtle manipulation of destiny. This artifact is their oracle, their means to foresee and ultimately to guide. But the final safeguard suggests a fail-safe, a catastrophic measure designed to be triggered under extreme duress. And the terror in Montague's eyes suggests that this safeguard is not merely defensive, but destructive." For hours, the scientists meticulously examined the device. Finch probed its internal mechanisms with delicate instruments. Vance inputted various numerical sequences, and Holmes, ever observant, watched their every move, his own mind racing, connecting disparate threads of information. Suddenly, Dr. Vance uttered a gasp. "Mr. Holmes, the sequence. I've found a correlation. The 5 symbols correspond to a rare form of ancient Roman numerical notation, used in certain obscure cults. But when I apply a specific algorithm, derived from early alchemical texts, it translates to a series of coordinates, not terrestrial, but spatial." She typed furiously on a small portable calculating machine. A series of numbers flashed across its display, and combined with the temporal predictions the device is generating, it seems to be charting a trajectory. A celestial one. Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Celestial? Not a location on Earth, but a position in the heavens?" "Precisely," Vance confirmed, her voice trembling with excitement. "A precise coordinate in space and a precise moment in time. It seems to be calculating the future position of a celestial body. An asteroid, Mr. Holmes. A specific, very large asteroid currently far beyond our solar system, but whose trajectory, according to this device's calculations, is on a collision course with Earth." A stunned silence filled the vault. Lestrade's jaw dropped. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. "A collision course?" I finally managed to stammer. "But that's impossible! Such an event would be decades, centuries away, and modern astronomy has detected nothing of the sort." "Modern astronomy, Watson," Holmes said, his voice quiet but firm, relies on observation. This device, if its claims are true, calculates based on fundamental underlying patterns of cosmic influence. The Riven Ram believed in such patterns. They believed in the currents of destiny. And this is their ultimate truth. The lost knowledge is not merely about human events. It is about the very fate of the Earth. And the final safeguard is perhaps a desperate measure to ensure that this truth remains hidden, even if it means sacrificing everything. Professor Finch, who had been studying the internal workings, spoke, his voice filled with a similar horror. And these internal mechanisms, Mr. Holmes, the rhythmic whirring, it's not just a calculator. It's a precise, timed trigger. The 5-digit code, it's a countdown. It's not predicting the collision, Mr. Holmes. It's activating something related to it. A final desperate action. A fail-safe mechanism designed to be triggered when the Riven Ram's ultimate secret is about to be exposed. A fail-safe, you say? Holmes echoed, his eyes fixed on the device, a terrible realization dawning in them. Not to prevent the collision, but to accelerate it, to ensure that the lost knowledge dies with the world, rather than be revealed. The thought was chilling in its enormity. The Order of the Riven Ram, driven by their belief in controlled destiny, had built not only a predictive oracle, but also a doomsday device, to be activated should their ultimate secret be threatened. The final safeguard was humanity's obliteration. With the terrifying implications of the artifact now laid bare, our attention turned back to Lord Arthur Montague. He was brought into a separate, equally secure interrogation room, his face impassive, almost serene, despite the knowledge of his impending doom. "Lord Montague," Holmes began, his voice calm, cutting through the heavy silence. "The device has revealed its true nature. It is not merely a predictor of destiny, but a trigger for global catastrophe. And the 5-digit code, the final safeguard, is a countdown to its activation. We know you are its leader. Tell us, what is the true purpose of this doomsday device?" Montague finally looked at Holmes, a faint, almost pitying smile on his lips. "You call it a doomsday device, Mr. Holmes. We call it the ultimate reset. The world, detective, is a cesspool of chaos. Human folly, ignorance, and greed lead only to suffering. We, the Riven Ram, have for centuries sought to bring order, to guide destiny, but humanity, in its obstinacy, resists. It clings to its illusions of free will, its petty squabbles. If knowledge cannot be controlled, if destiny cannot be guided, then it must be eradicated, cleansed. And from the ashes, a new order will arise, guided by those few who truly understand the algorithms of the universe." His voice, though quiet, resonated with a chilling conviction. "The lost knowledge is not merely a collection of facts, Mr. Holmes. It is the truth of existence. The universe is a predictable machine, and we, the Riven Ram, were chosen to be its engineers. The sea serpent was merely one of many tools, one of many vessels designed to gather the fragments of this truth. The final fragment, the one you now possess, is the activation key, the means to truly control the oracle." "So, you intended to use this device to bring about global catastrophe," Lestrade stated, his voice tight with barely contained rage. "If necessary," Montague replied, his gaze unwavering. "A necessary purification. The asteroid? It has always been out there. The oracle merely revealed its trajectory, its ultimate purpose, and we, the Riven Ram, found the means to ensure its timely arrival, should humanity prove unworthy of the truth." "And the specific timing, Lord Montague?" Holmes pressed. "The 5-digit code, what does it represent? A date, a time, a celestial alignment?" Montague chuckled, a dry, hollow sound. "That, detective, is the final irony. The activation sequence, it is a paradox. It requires not merely the input of the 5 symbols, but a synchronization with a specific and impossible celestial event. A conjunction of 5 specific celestial bodies that, according to your linear understanding of astronomy, will not occur for millennia." "An impossible event?" I whispered, looking at Holmes. "A brilliant safeguard, Watson," Holmes murmured, ignoring Montague for a moment. "A seemingly impossible condition, designed to prevent premature activation. But given the Riven Ram's centuries of dedication, they must have believed it was achievable, perhaps through manipulation of other factors, or by discovering a hidden variable within the algorithms of influence." "The serpent's eye," Montague continued, his voice now taking on a chilling, almost poetic quality. "It is not merely a geographical location. It is also a celestial phenomenon, a rare alignment of gravitational forces that would create a gravitational eddy, allowing the precise impossible conjunction to occur. The scuttling of the original sea serpent there was not merely to hide the fragment, it was to place it at the nexus of this rare celestial event. A cosmic trigger, you might say. The ship, the location, the artifact, the celestial alignment, all were part of the ultimate design. He smiled, a grim, triumphant expression.
Holmes, but
You have recovered the knowledge to truly activate it, and even if you did, you would not dare. The choice now is yours. Let the truth of humanity's inevitable demise be known, or keep the secret, and allow the Order, in its wisdom, to continue its work, preparing for the inevitable. Holmes's eyes, fixed on Montague, held a newfound understanding. So, the final safeguard is not merely a self-destruct mechanism, but a means to force humanity's hand, to accelerate the very doom you predict, should your control over the lost knowledge be threatened. A terrifying gamble, Lord Montague, and one that assumes a level of omnipotence that even the Riven Ram does not possess. We possess the truth, Detective, Montague countered, his voice rising in intensity. And soon, the world will acknowledge it. My capture is merely a temporary setback. The seeds of our work are sown. The path is set. You cannot unsee what you have seen. As Montague spoke, a sudden, violent commotion erupted outside the interrogation room. Shouts, the clang of metal, and then the distinct crack of a firearm. Lestrade's men, who had been guarding the corridor, cried out in alarm. "What in blazes?" Lestrade exclaimed, drawing his own revolver. Holmes, his senses always acutely attuned, immediately recognized the pattern. "Throckmorton, he has returned!" Indeed, the door to the interrogation room burst open, revealing Throckmorton, his face a mask of furious determination, a large, archaic revolver clutched in his hand. He was battered, his clothes torn, but his eyes burned with an unwavering loyalty to the Order. Behind him, several yard constables lay incapacitated. "You fools!" Throckmorton snarled, his gaze sweeping the room, settling on the pulsating artifact in the secured vault beyond. "You dare to defile the Oracle! You dare to question the will of the Riven Ram!" He raised his revolver, aiming directly at the vault. The Order's secrets will not be betrayed. If it means the end of all, then so be it. "Throckmorton, no!" Lestrade bellowed, lunging forward, but it was too late. Throckmorton fired. The bullet, a heavy slug, struck the lock of the vault with a deafening crack, shattering the mechanism. With another desperate surge, he pushed past Lestrade, his eyes wild, and stumbled towards the steel table where the artifact rested. "He means to activate the final safeguard," Holmes cried, recognizing Throckmorton's desperate intent. "He will trigger the impossible conjunction." Throckmorton reached the artifact, his calloused fingers fumbling with the intricate brass key that still protruded from its side. His eyes, fixed on the glowing patterns, seemed to hold a fanatical devotion. "For the Order!" he screamed, his voice raw with a terrible triumph. "For the Riven Ram! Let the cleansing begin!" With a decisive twist, Throckmorton forced the key further into the artifact. A blinding flash of light erupted from the device, filling the vault with an unearthly emerald glow. The hum intensified to a deafening roar, and the intricate gears spun with dizzying speed. The patterns of light on its surface morphed into a chaotic vortex, swirling with a terrifying energy. Lord Montague, witnessing the scene, let out a guttural cry of pure terror. "No! Throckmorton, you fool! You do not understand. He wouldn't. The true safeguard." His face, once serene, was now a mask of profound horror. Holmes, with a grim determination, lunged forward, but the surge of energy from the device threw him back, sending him crashing against the wall. I, Watson, found myself pinned by an invisible force, unable to move, watching in horror as the Oracle roared to life. But then, just as the cacophony reached its peak, a new distinct sound pierced the air. Not the roar of the artifact, but a sharp, metallic clink. And then, a series of rapid, rhythmic clicks. From a hidden compartment within the artifact itself, a series of tiny metallic gears and springs ejected, scattering across the steel table, and with them a small parchment scroll tightly rolled and sealed with a familiar dark wax. The artifact's blinding light flickered, then dimmed, its roaring hum fading to a faint rhythmic pulse. The swirling patterns of light on its surface slowed, coalescing into a single complex symbol, a perfectly rendered unbroken ram. Not the Riven Ram, but a whole, untainted one. Throckmorton, who had been caught in the backlash of the artifact's activation, lay slumped beside it, his face pale, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrible understanding. Holmes, picking himself up, his eyes fixed on the device, slowly approached the table. He picked up the small ejected scroll, his fingers carefully breaking the wax seal. "The true safeguard, Watson," Holmes murmured, his voice hushed with a chilling revelation. "The final, devastating irony of the Riven Ram's ambition." He unrolled the scroll. The message, written in a precise, almost elegant hand, was clear. "To the inheritors of the Oracle, the final safeguard is not destruction but revelation. Should the truth of the Oracle be threatened, its deepest secret shall be unleashed. The asteroid is but a lure. The true power lies not in its collision, but in its redirection. The Oracle, when activated by the 5-digit key, will not trigger doom, but will instead broadcast the complete, unadulterated lost knowledge to every scientific and intellectual institution on Earth. The secrets of the universe will be known to all. The era of hidden truth and of your order's control is at an end." A profound silence descended upon the vault. Lord Montague, staring at the symbol of the unbroken ram on the artifact, let out a choked cry, a sound of utter despair. "No, it cannot be! He lied! The founder! He betrayed us! The Riven Ram broken!" Throckmorton, slowly pushing himself up, read the scroll over Holmes's shoulder, his face, once fanatical, now contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. "No, it was a lie, all of it. The cleansing, the new order, it was a paradox, a betrayal from within." The true nature of the final safeguard was a monumental act of subversion, built into the very core of the Order's ambition. The founder of the Riven Ram, perhaps foreseeing the dangers of absolute control, had embedded a brilliant, ultimate irony. The moment their grand secret was threatened, the Oracle would not destroy the world, but would instead democratize the lost knowledge, shattering the Order's monopoly on truth forever. The asteroid, the doomsday scenario, was merely a grand, elaborate diversion, designed to keep the true purpose of the final safeguard concealed even from its own leadership. The founder's ultimate belief, it seemed, was not in control, but in the unstoppable, liberating power of knowledge itself. Holmes slowly folded the scroll, his gaze sweeping the room, from the despairing Montague to the horrified Throckmorton, and finally to the softly pulsating artifact, now emitting a gentle, steady light, no longer a harbinger of doom, but a beacon of universal revelation. "The ultimate paradox, Watson," Holmes murmured, a note of profound satisfaction in his voice. "The architect of control, betrayed by the very essence of knowledge he sought to hoard. Lord Montague, your order of the Riven Ram is not merely broken, but paradoxically, its greatest ambition, the widespread dissemination of its lost knowledge, has been fulfilled, Watson, and the broken remnants of the Riven Ram, the world had just changed irrevocably. The truth, in its raw, unadulterated form, was now poised to unravel centuries of manipulation, promising a future as unpredictable as it was profound." Act 5, The Dawn of Unveiled Truth. The immediate aftermath of the Oracle's activation was a maelstrom of light and sound. The vault at Scotland Yard, a sanctuary designed for secrets, became a conduit for an unprecedented global outpouring of truth. The blinding emerald flash, the deafening hum that permeated the very foundations of the building, was merely the localized manifestation of a phenomenon occurring simultaneously across the globe. As the last echoes of the artifact's roar faded, replaced by its steady, benevolent hum, a new form of communication, unfelt by human hand but intuitively understood by its targets, began its silent, unstoppable transmission. Within moments, the first reports, bewildered and incredulous, began to filter into Scotland Yard. The telegraph lines, usually a reliable conduit for the mundane and the sensational, now crackled with messages of utter disbelief from every corner of the civilized world. From the hallowed halls of Cambridge to the nascent observatories of America, from the ancient universities of Europe to the fledgling scientific academies of the Empire's distant outposts, a singular, incomprehensible event was unfolding. Scientists, philosophers, and savants, regardless of their field or specialty, found their instruments, their calculations, and their very minds bombarded with an influx of raw, undiluted information. Professor Finch, still trembling from the Oracle's sudden burst of energy, stumbled back towards his calculating machine, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and dawning comprehension. "Mr. Holmes, my instruments, they're receiving. Not a signal, not a broadcast in the conventional sense, but a direct, instantaneous transference of pure data. Astronomical coordinates, precise gravitational equations, historical timelines unlike anything we've ever conceived. It's as if the very fabric of knowledge is being rewritten before our eyes." Dr. Vance, equally pale but with a look of frantic exhilaration, gripped her head as if to contain the torrent of incoming information. "It's saturating every known scientific frequency. Theoretical constructs, physical laws, the very building blocks of the universe. It's speaking in the language of numbers, of cosmic geometry. It's correcting inconsistencies in our understanding of celestial mechanics, revealing hidden forces, new dimensions." Lestrade, his face a picture of bewildered consternation, looked from the frantic scientists to the now quietly pulsing artifact, then back to Holmes. "What in blazes is happening, Holmes? What did that infernal contraption do?" "It has, Inspector," Holmes replied, his voice calm amidst the growing chaos, yet tinged with a profound awe, "fulfilled its true purpose. The lost knowledge is no longer lost. It is being unveiled. The founder of the Riven Ram, in his ultimate act of defiance against the very control his order sought, has, through this oracle, gifted humanity with the unfiltered truths of existence. The secrets of the universe, no longer the exclusive domain of a select few, but now the inheritance of all mankind." Lord Montague, who had slumped into a chair, his face ashen, stared at the pulsating artifact with a look of utter, soul-crushing despair. "No, no, it cannot be. The great lie. The founder, he was not the visionary. He was the great traitor. He has shattered our sacred trust, centuries of careful preservation, of guiding humanity through chaos, all undone." His voice dissolved into a strangled sob, a sound of absolute, irreversible defeat. The man who had sought to control destiny was now confronted with the ultimate loss of control. Throckmorton, who had slowly regained his senses, crawled towards the oracle, his hands outstretched as if to touch the source of his profound disillusionment. His earlier fanaticism had been replaced by a chilling void. "A paradox," he whispered, his voice hollow. "The Riven Ram, broken by its own truth. We were merely tools, fools." The phenomenon was not merely a scientific curiosity, it was a societal earthquake. Within hours, news began to filter in from the wider world. Telegraph offices were overwhelmed. Astronomers published immediate, stunned retractions of long-held theories. Physicists found their foundational equations subtly yet fundamentally altered by new, undeniable variables. Historians were presented with precise timelines of forgotten civilizations, complete with their rise and fall, revealing connections previously undreamt of. The very understanding of human history, of science, of the cosmos, was being profoundly and irrevocably reshaped. The world was reeling. Initial reactions were a mixture of incredulity, fear, and then slowly, a dawning, terrifying exhilaration. Governments, initially dismissing the widespread scientific reports as a mass hallucination or a sophisticated hoax, found themselves confronted by undeniable evidence that was consistent across disparate sources and independent analyses. The truth, in its rawest form, was simply too pervasive, too detailed, and too complex to be anything other than what it was. Days bled into weeks, and the initial shock began to settle into a new, disorienting reality. The oracle, housed under constant guard, continued its subtle, silent transmission, its data stream now being actively processed by a global consortium of scientists, working in frantic, unprecedented collaboration. New scientific societies emerged overnight, dedicated solely to the analysis and interpretation of the lost knowledge. Old rivalries and nationalistic barriers seemed to crumble in the face of this shared, monumental undertaking. Lord Montague's downfall was swift and absolute. His confession, extracted by Holmes and Lestrade under the crushing weight of the oracle's revelation, confirmed his leadership of the modern Riven Ram, detailing their smuggling operations, their historical machinations, and their terrifying, if ultimately subverted, ambition for global control. The exposure of his true nature, juxtaposed with his public image as a benevolent philanthropist, sent shockwaves through London's elite. His vast shipping empire, once a symbol of his power, was now subject to intense scrutiny, revealing decades of illicit dealings that had funded the Riven Ram's clandestine activities. He faced charges of smuggling, conspiracy, and perhaps most damningly in the court of public opinion, the attempted manipulation of global events. His philosophical justifications for cleansing humanity were met with revulsion. The Riven Ram, as an organization, was irrevocably shattered. Its adherents, now exposed and disillusioned, either fled into obscurity or, like Throckmorton, faced the profound crisis of their shattered beliefs. Throckmorton's fate was more complex. The fanaticism that had driven him was utterly extinguished, replaced by a deep, existential despair. He saw the Founder's final safeguard, not as an ultimate liberation of truth, but as the ultimate betrayal of the Riven Ram's core mission. His interrogations, conducted by Holmes in the quiet hours, revealed a man grappling with the collapse of his entire worldview. He admitted to assisting Montague, not for personal gain, but out of a misguided sense of loyalty to an order he believed was striving for a higher purpose. He confirmed the locations of several smaller Riven Ram cells across Europe, now utterly disoriented and leaderless, their centuries-long efforts revealed to be a paradoxically self-destructive pursuit. He faced a lengthy prison sentence, but his punishment seemed almost secondary to the internal torment of his broken faith. Found himself thrust into the unenviable position of coordinating an international response to a cosmic event. He rose to the occasion with a grim competence, his pragmatic nature providing a necessary anchor amidst the intellectual and societal upheaval. He handled the unprecedented influx of international inquiries, navigated the diplomatic minefields, and ensured the security of the Oracle, while scientists painstakingly deciphered its ongoing transmissions. He was a policeman, first and foremost, and the lost knowledge, while awe-inspiring, was ultimately a problem of order and management. For Sherlock Holmes, the Oracle's revelation marked a new, profound chapter in his life. The ultimate mystery had been solved, not merely a criminal puzzle, but a cosmic one. He spent countless hours in the vault, not merely observing the scientists, but interacting with the Oracle itself. He would sit for hours, his mind absorbing the raw data, processing the new cosmic algorithms, and contemplating the implications for humanity. He seemed to grasp the complex data streams intuitively, making connections that even the assembled Royal Society experts struggled with. "Watson," he remarked one evening, as we sat in the vault, the soft hum of the Oracle filling the air. "The lost knowledge is not merely a collection of facts, it is a new lens through which to view existence. It reveals the intricate symphony of cause and effect, the profound interconnectedness of all things, from the smallest subatomic particle to the grandest celestial body. The Riven Ram believed they could control this symphony, but the Founder understood that true power lies not in control, but in understanding. And understanding, when shared, leads not to mastery, but to humility." "But what will this mean for humanity, Holmes?" I asked, my mind still grappling with the immensity of it all. Such knowledge, it could overwhelm us. It could lead to despair or to a new form of tyranny. Holmes nodded, his gaze fixed on the pulsating artifact. "Indeed, Watson, the path ahead is fraught with peril. Humanity, suddenly presented with the naked truth of its place in the cosmos, will undoubtedly struggle. There will be those who embrace it with awe, those who reject it with fear, and those who seek to exploit it for their own gain. The very foundations of our philosophies, our religions, our societal structures will be shaken. But," he continued, a flicker of profound hope in his eyes, "it is a necessary evolution. Ignorance, however comforting, is ultimately a form of bondage. True freedom lies in knowledge, however daunting." He reflected on the Riven Ram's centuries-long quest. The Order of the Riven Ram, in their misguided pursuit of control, inadvertently served a grander purpose. Their obsession with the lost knowledge, their tireless efforts to collect its fragments, ultimately led to its complete unveiling. Their failure to maintain secrecy became humanity's greatest gift. A cosmic irony, indeed. The scientific community, galvanized by the Oracle's revelations, initiated unprecedented collaborations. New forms of energy, previously considered impossible, were now theoretically derivable from the newly understood laws of physics. Astronomical discoveries redefined our galaxy and beyond. Medical research, armed with a deeper understanding of biological algorithms, hinted at cures for diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia. The sheer scale of advancement promised by the Oracle was staggering, almost overwhelming. Yet Holmes was keenly aware of the potential for misuse. The algorithms of influence, when fully understood, could theoretically allow for unprecedented manipulation of financial markets, political elections, and even mass psychological trends. The very tools the Riven Ram had sought to wield were now openly accessible. "My work, Watson," Holmes declared one crisp autumn morning, as we strolled through Hyde Park, the city still buzzing with the intellectual ferment of the great unveiling, "is far from over. The criminal element, ever opportunistic, will seek to exploit this new knowledge for nefarious purposes. The lost knowledge does not eliminate crime, it merely alters its landscape. My deductions must now adapt to a universe revealed, rather than merely observed. The challenges will be greater, the stakes immeasurable." He received regular reports from the Royal Society scientists, often spending hours in deep, abstract discussions with them, guiding their interpretations, pointing out subtle nuances in the Oracle's data streams that only his unique mind could discern. He became, in a sense, a custodian of this new cosmic truth, not seeking to control it, but to ensure its responsible assimilation. The case of the phantom ship of the Thames, which had begun as a local maritime mystery, had culminated in a revelation that reshaped humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. The old derelict ship, once a symbol of superstition and petty crime, had become the catalyst for an unparalleled dawn of knowledge. Lord Montague, stripped of his power, his reputation ruined, and his grand illusion shattered, faced a bleak future. His final days, I imagined, would be spent in the profound despair of a man whose life's work had been utterly ironically subverted. Throckmorton, the loyal but ultimately disillusioned fanatic, faced his own reckoning, his faith replaced by a cold, bitter emptiness. The Order of the Riven Ram, a secret society that had guarded its lost knowledge for centuries, was finally truly broken, not by force but by the very truth it sought to hoard. The Thames continued its timeless flow, its waters still murky, still carrying the echoes of its long history. But now its depths held not just the secrets of a sunken vessel, but the memory of a pivotal moment when the very cosmos itself whispered its truths to the world. Holmes, often restless in the face of mundane challenges, now found a new, infinite frontier for his intellect. The universe, in all its revealed complexity, beckoned. There would be new algorithms to decipher, new cosmic patterns to understand, and new, more sophisticated criminal minds to contend with. The great game for Sherlock Holmes had simply expanded beyond the confines of terrestrial London, now encompassing the very fabric of time and space. And I, Dr. John H. Watson, would, as ever, be there to chronicle the astonishing journey of my friend, the consulting detective, as he navigated the dawn of a new, unveiled truth. His greatest adventures, I suspected, were only just beginning, in a world forever transformed by the phantom ship and the oracle it held. Epilogue. The turning of the new year, 1894, brought with it not merely the usual calendar shift, but a profound reordering of human understanding. The lost knowledge, unveiled by the oracle, continued its silent, ceaseless transmission, and humanity, still reeling, slowly began to assimilate its truths. The initial shock had given way to a period of frenetic intellectual activity, a global renaissance driven by the unfiltered data pouring from the artifact. Cambridge, Oxford, Göttingen, and countless other centres of learning became crucibles of unprecedented collaboration. Old theories were re-evaluated, new scientific disciplines emerged, and the very boundaries between once disparate fields of study began to blur. Dr. Vance, now lauded as one of the world's foremost interpreters of the oracle, found herself at the heart of an international consortium dedicated to deciphering its complex data streams. Professor Finch, captivated by the device's ancient mechanisms, worked tirelessly to replicate its principles, hinting at technologies that would not see the light of day for another century. Of energy, of cures for ancient diseases, and of a deeper understanding of the cosmos filled the air, a heady elixir that both exhilarated and daunted mankind. For Inspector Lestrade, life at Scotland Yard took on a peculiar, almost surreal quality. The phantom ship case, once a source of professional torment, had become the defining moment of his career, elevating him from a capable if uninspired detective to a figure of international renown. He found himself chairing committees on global scientific security, liaising with foreign dignitaries on the implications of cosmic algorithms and managing the security of an artifact that held the keys to the universe. He approached it all with his characteristic pragmatism, a sturdy anchor in the swirling currents of intellectual revolution. He often complained to Holmes about the sheer volume of paperwork, but there was a new, almost imperceptible gleam of pride in his eyes. Lord Arthur Montague, stripped of his titles and his fortune, was consigned to a life behind bars. His despair never truly lifted. He spoke often in his solitary confinement of the great lie and the great traitor, believing to his dying day that the founder of the Riven Ram had committed the ultimate betrayal by allowing their sacred knowledge to be democratized. His vision of a controlled, purified humanity had been shattered, and he remained a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition and the insidious nature of self-serving truth. Throckmorton, after serving a reduced sentence due to his eventual cooperation, faded into obscurity. The fanaticism that had defined him was replaced by a profound, almost spiritual emptiness. He became a quiet, reclusive figure, forever haunted by the paradox of his life's devotion to an order that had ultimately, ironically, broken itself. His story served as a chilling reminder that even the most zealous belief could be built upon a foundation of misguided perception. And Sherlock Holmes? The great game for him had indeed expanded. Baker Street, while still his sanctuary, became a nexus for intellectual exploration that transcended the bounds of terrestrial crime. He received a constant stream of visitors, astronomers seeking his insight on newly revealed celestial mechanics, physicists grappling with paradoxical equations, and even philosophers seeking guidance on the ethical implications of infinite knowledge. He often spent days, sometimes weeks, in the oracle's vault, his mind absorbing its intricacies, identifying patterns and applications that eluded even the most brilliant of scientists. He never sought public acclaim for his role in the great unveiling. His satisfaction came from the pure pursuit of truth, from the unraveling of the most intricate puzzles. He understood that the lost knowledge was not an endpoint, but a beginning. It presented humanity with unprecedented opportunities, but also unforeseen challenges. New forms of crime, more subtle and insidious, would inevitably emerge, seeking to exploit the very truths that had been revealed. The algorithms of influence, while now openly accessible, could still be twisted for nefarious purposes by minds less scrupulous than his own. One late autumn afternoon, as the Thames flowed silently beneath a London still adapting to its newly revealed cosmic place, Holmes stood by the window at 221B, gazing out at the familiar, yet now profoundly altered cityscape. "Watson," he murmured without turning, "the ripples of the phantom ship extend far beyond the Thames now. The world has been given a new set of eyes, a new understanding of its own mechanics. But with vision comes responsibility. My work, I find, has only just truly begun." I, Dr. John H. Watson, could only nod, a sense of wonder and profound admiration filling my heart. The era of the simple criminal had passed, replaced by a complex, bewildering, and infinitely fascinating new age. And in this age, where the very universe had whispered its secrets, my friend Sherlock Holmes remained the unparalleled guardian of truth, his keen intellect poised to navigate the unfolding horizon of human destiny. The adventures, I knew, would continue, ever more grand, ever more extraordinary. Thank you so much for listening to our honouring audiobooks original Sherlock Holmes adventure. We hope you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to leave a comment, letting us know which story you'd like to hear next and where you're tuning in from. We love hearing from our detective fans around the world. See you in the next adventure.